Sword of Coming Chapter 871. 17,000-word chapter. The next small chapter will be updated later and must be uploaded in the early morning. When Qin Pingon was young, he once sighed that Aquarius was too big, but it turned out to be only the smallest continent in the world. But for a monk of the 14 realms, the land of one continent was as small as his own courtyard. Those who have attained Taoism travel far away in the wind, with a bird's-eye view of the world, with a panoramic view of all oddities. I once saw a monk sitting cross-legged under a waterfall to enter the concentration, with his hands folded under the sun like a golden arhat. A bird leaned low and swept, and the tip of its wings cut through the surface of the pond ripples. In the courtyard of the wealthy family, there is a large magnolia tree, and a woman is leaning on a railing to admire the flowers. She may be silently thinking of a certain sweetheart, with a raised eaves and flowering branches, secretly holding hands. The mountains in the small country of the Dali clan, the mountain roads are steep, the bearers who lift the sliding poles, and the female family members of the guests who walk like flying, and take the sedan chair to climb the mountain are blindfolded and miss the great scenery along the way. In a water town, there is a girl in a lotus skirt on the side of the road, barefoot, carrying embroidered shoes, walking on tiptoes. A wealthy young man with hundreds of slaves drove a mountain and dredged a lake in a secluded place where the mountains and rivers and spirits have fallen and there is no fill. There was Gao Shi drunk lying in the pavilion in the mountain, and suddenly white clouds came outside the cliff pavilion. He raised his glass high and threw it out of the pavilion. Gao Shi was drunk with dim eyes and said loudly, saying that there are 9 water-stubborn rocks lying on the mountain, and I don't know how many thousands of them. 4 thousands of years. Bai Yun under this pavilion has provided the most refining methods. Seeing this beautiful scenery, I am grateful. There are several fairy masters riding the cranes. Among them, the delicate young people waved their whisks, making the white clouds flying around like chaotic snow, and the smiling girls on the side like flowers. In a deep and secluded mountain, there was a 2-foot-tall goddess of mountain goddess. She was walking on the corridor with her skirts swaying on the ground. Behind her were 2 rows of virgin boys and girls who died and were gathered by her after their deaths. An unclear peak, the mountain is steep and slender like a carp's back, the whole mountain is like a knife chopped on the chopping board. On the edge of the cliff at the end of the mountain trail, there was a lonely courtyard built with white walls and tiles, a patio for waters, and only an ancient pine rooted in the cliff nearby. But more, it was the ruins of those cities and towns. It has been many years since the war ended, but it still hasn't been able to restore its former appearance. In the mountains and rivers of the half-continent, there are 2 different things except for the old cliff-engraved books on the mountain and countless brand-new epitaphs under the mountain. Previously in Dali capital, the imperial examination by Chao Qingqing was named Xianxia in the same year. He worked at the Hongfu Temple in Nangsanfang and helped Qin Pingon get some recent imperial residence papers. Qin Pingon went to several places recorded in the Dibao according to the picture. Most of them just stayed for a while and left after reading. In Yuzhang County, which is full of towering trees, whether it is used to build mansions or as coffins, it is a first-class wood. Needless to say, Qin Pingon saw a group of wood thieves fighting in the mountains armed with officials. And there are countless looms in Wuxia, which is known as the Cocoon Mountain. A Jilua courtyard has been completed, and the official plaques are all hung up. It has been fully budgeted in less than a month, which is enough to show the speed of the various government orders issued by Dali. At the boundary of Yunzhou of Huangting State, I saw that stream. As expected, it was really the entrance to the ancient Shu Kingdom's Dragon Palace ruins. The water quality of the stream was excellent. If it was clear, Qin Pingon chose a spring and drew dozens of caddies of water. I took a trip to the Dragon Palace site again, ignoring the ancient restrictions such as entering the land of no one, entering it earlier than the Dali Geomancer and ascending first, but Qin Pingon did not take away the few treasures of the Immortal family. It was a mountain and river tour. The earliest lotus roots in Tonggishao, and later the Xianfu ruins in Luzhou, Beiju, encountered the old master of the Taoist temple in Donghai and Daochang, son of the Dakshuandi temple. Qin Pingon is now looking at this kind of immortal. It's really a bit embarrassing. There is also an official of the Ministry of Industry of the Dali companion capital named Li Chue on the Dibao. The family has been a hydraulic engineer for generations. He carefully drew a guide map involving the diversion of more than a dozen Dadu vassal rivers. Unexpectedly, The Dali court has dispatched a Qintian superintendent who is proficient in misunderstandings to investigate whether this matter is feasible. For the gods of mountains and rivers, there are also natural disasters and man-made disasters. In a great battle, the entire southern part of Aquarius continent lost countless landscape gods, and only then did the civil and military heroic Een spirits from all over the continent, mountains and rivers, make up a large number of city gods and landscape gods at all levels. The diversion of the river is a huge disaster for the gods of mountains and rivers along the way. It can cause the gods of mountains and rivers to suffer floods, flood their golden bodies, and the gods of water suffer drought and expose themselves to the sun. The golden body and temples, under normal circumstances, can't walk, and migration is as difficult as climbing to the sky. There are temples and temples empty, and without the incense on earth, they will be cancelled from the golden jade genealogy by the court according to the law, and they can only be reduced to Immerse. Then you can only endure hardships, at least temporarily, borrowing incense from the neighboring city gods, not to mention that you have to borrow. Therefore, in the Xianxia officialdom, I have always preferred to be the county goddess with extremely limited powers, rather than the landscape subordinates who clearly restrain the lesser mountain gods and the rivers of Hebo and Hippo. An old man with the appearance of a farmer, with a sturdy figure and a tanned skin, is like an old village man facing the lush with his back to the sky, squatting on the long embankment by the river now, sighing and sorrowing. There was a young man sitting on the side, placing a bamboo mat with a Hunan pattern, and gently swaying the folding fan. The bamboo fan had a similar pattern to the bamboo mat. The young man's skin was a bit sickly white, as if he had been hiding in the study all the year round. A scholar who doesn't get exposed to the sun. The two stayed together. Their ages were very different, and their appearances were in sharp contrast, like a piece of white tofu placed together with a piece of charcoal. The old man said, "Looking back, I will talk to Master Lu from the Department of Dali, and see if I can ask for some mercy and help hand over a copy." The young man shook his head, speaking straightforwardly like a stunned young man who couldn't figure out what's good or bad. "It's just a principal, not a capital official, so I can't speak." The old man said, annoyed, "Who are the lords of the princes? Can you climb high? Just like the little gods like us who are in charge of the mountain and water boundaries of small mountains and small rivers. The chief Lu is already the biggest official I know. It's better to be a dead horse doctor than to wait for death here." The so-called Longguan refers to the Longzhong and Yuan Wai Lang, who are the chief and auxiliary officials of the Ministry of Rites. For these gods of mountains and rivers who are not very popular, they are the great masters of the heavenly officials inside the yamen. The young man smiled indifferently. If the gods are going to marry, what can be done is to admit her fate. The change of course, regardless of self-interest, is indeed beneficial to the people's livelihood. The old man threw a stone into the river and said dully, "The emperor is not in a hurry." The young man was still calm and calm. "Who made you my friend?" The old man turned his head and glanced at him and said softly, "Here is a trainer who is face to face. He can't see the real level. At first glance it looks like a Sevuing state." The young man glanced at the approaching foreigner in a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, breathing long while walking, and he was not a mundane master at first glance. The gods of the world are good at looking for breath, and they can often tell who is better than a monk. Whether or not it is a gas trainer, as to whether you can see the depth of Taoism at a glance, it depends on the height of a golden statue of a deity. The young man folded his fan and smiled and said, "I advise you not to go to the hospital in a hurry. Besides, the rivers here have been diverted, and a total of 6 river tributaries have been abandoned. This is a great thing for you, the mountain god, so don't worry about it. You have annexed the old waters under my jurisdiction, as if the water does not flow into the fields of outsiders." The other mountain gods and land princes in the vicinity are now eagerly waiting for the Ministry of Rites and Engineering Department to start blaspheming and diversion. As for those river gods and the low-ranking Hebo, they are resigned to their fate. Although the courtesy that accompanied the capital, the officials of the two ministries promised that the Dali court would arrange a retreat, but they were afraid that it was just a scene. Once they turned their faces and refused to admit it, who would they complain to? The veteran cried out, "What a good thing, the site is big, there will be more rights and wrongs, not to mention that it was originally belonged to the jumping river. I am so upset. As soon as you leave me alone. Whatever the matter, help you guard the tomb. You were a senior official before you were alive, but at any rate I was also a marquis and a beautiful posthumous post. How come I can't take the turn of Lao Tzu to guard the tomb for Tai Futsin? You really think you are the emperor? The young man persuaded, even if the incense on earth is cut off, the family properties that I have saved plus I will borrow some incense from you in the future, your pile of Yunling will be a waste guest who can only eat and not work. It is estimated that it will not be difficult to make another one. You have to think so, the ordinary master under the mountain 60 years is almost a lifetime, so what can I complain about? The green shirt stopped, clasped his fist and smiled. Sanxiu Chaomo, I have seen Doshan God in Dayunling. The man surnamed Chao, who claimed to be Xianxia, turned his head and looked at the young man. This must be the Tsinhibo who jumped into the Po River. Dayunling mountain god Do was flooded, and he was named a Ho before his death. He has served as county town god, and mountain god here. In Dayunling there is a fairy illusion that the Immortal soars up and down the market. Zhou Xian, who jumped into the Po River, had served as a transshipment agent during his lifetime. He was the abbot of a country's water transport and dredging and granary construction. The old man smiled and nodded, raised his arms high and held a fist in return with the fairy master surnamed Chao. I am lucky enough to meet you. The little baby looks young and has a good vision. She recognizes herself and Xian, especially her old friends who are notoriously simple. No matter who comes to Diaobo River, they will thank guests behind closed doors. Xianxia is still big. Tsinhibo was still pretending to be deaf and dumb, and Do Yen was helpless. The old fish of Xian jumped waves to chew flowers and eat. They are all famous up and down the mountain. The mountain masters who come to fish here are as high-ranking officials as the unique apricot perch and giant green in the river. For hundreds of years, I haven't seen Xian close to anyone. If I replaced it with the mountain gods, I had met a few big baskets of rich and noble princesses, and then he became a big pilgrim in her own temple. In fact, there are two places, Dali capital and accompanying capital. Even if many literati and scholars have heard of Diaobo, inside and outside the officialdom, no one dares to abandon the public for personal reasons. In this matter, I have to say a word for Tsinhibo and Diaobo. Words. The green shirt guest looked around and smiled and said, Tsinhibo is as good as external rumors. His temperament is weak. He doesn't care about the amount of incense at all, as long as the Hanoi people do not violate the prohibition and disdain to manage the landscape. If I remember correctly, the hundreds of thousands of people who have been jumped into the Po River's ends have been around for almost 200 years. There has not been a second-class Jinsher, but two fellow Jinsher backgrounds have appeared intermittently. Mrs. ? In fact, the early jumping of the Po River in the morning is very rich and mellow, whether it is the scenery, the atmosphere, the civil and military luck, and it is well known in the mountains and rivers of many countries. It is just that the years have passed and the dynasties have changed several times. There were no floods on both sides of the strait, and there was no drought in her own waters, so Xian stopped taking care of any unnecessary matters. So that Xian is still a he-uncle today. Otherwise, because of the reputation of jumping the Po River and the richness of water transportation, how can she be a water who is honored by the court, and even carried the river on the golden and jade genealogy enshrined by the Ministry of Ritual of that country? Xinjiang is not impossible. Do Yen held back his laughter, suffocated his anger, worked well and relieved his anger. This kid was cursing well, but Xian was originally cursing. Regardless of whether it is the officialdom of the Premortem or the officialdom of Xianxia today, what a good thing is that evacuation is light, clean and self-conscious, does not go to the same trend and does not manage contacts at all. Only now, Do Yen feels sad when he thinks of the situation of his old friend Xian. But after listening to the Madame ridicule, Do Yen was a little bit ridiculous. This official statement is a bit detrimental. The gift of a scholarship is similar to a little concubine, compared to the first-class 3 and the second-class scholar. Just like a woman is not the original partner of the main house, of course she is, like a wife and not a wife. Xian didn't care when listening to a stranger's implicit sarcasm. After all, it wasn't the kind of swearing on the street, so I didn't understand it. Seeing that the outsider chose a fishing spot, he took out a can of drunk corn that he had prepared for a long time, threw it on the nest, took out a green bamboo fishing rod, touched some snails by the river and hooked it. After that he started to throw the rod and go fishing. Zhou Xian is a natural warm-hearted and he can talk a few words with anyone. Master Chao, where is the person from? A native of Dai. This time I went out to travel south, just walk and stroll, stepping on the watermelon peel to wherever it is. It's good to dare. If you come a few days later you might miss the apricot sea bass and large herring. God Zhou Xian, what do you say? Sun Wenqian coughed slightly. Dou Yan was too lazy to pay attention to Sun Hebo's reminder. Instead he got up and squatted next to the Master Chow. Many waters have already started to relocate. By then the riverbed will be bare and the apricot flowers on both sides will die. How can we talk about the apricot perch? Qin Pingon nodded and said, as a result jumping the Po River did suffer a great deal. I was so lucky. Dou Yan's heart was cold after hearing the following sentence. Brother Chow, when I see you I won't go in circles with you. I might as well say something to Brother Dou. Are you an official of the Ministry of Industry of Dali Capital? On the surface, you are fishing for self-entertainment, but in fact it is an investigation. Mountains and rivers? The officials are not big. My brother sees people's eyesight has always been not bad. Look at your official air. Tut, not small, really not small. You have to start with a master, right? In the future you will be in charge of a master. I don't see a big problem. If I'm not wrong, Brother Chow was born in Cheer Street, Jingqing, and was a young handsome man of the great general, so he served as a monk in the frontier army of Dali. When the battle was over he took advantage of the situation and transferred from Dallas Iron Cavalry. Serving as an errand in the Ministry of Engineering? Isn't it? Looking at the landscape and appearance of old Brother Chow, he can't be wrong, absolutely can't be wrong, but I don't know whether it is in the U Department of the Ministry of Industry of the capital or the Water Department. The two lords of the Ministry of Industry are in charge of all government and decrees in the world, including rivers and mountains, official posts, bridges and weirs and canals. They are not insignificant. Qin Pingon has never spoken. If this Dou Xian went to set up a fortune-telling booth he would starve to death. Dou Yan didn't give up. Brother Chow, if you can give the official of the Ministry of Industry, of course, the master servant will be better. You only need to help pass the sentence. Regardless of success or failure I will come to Daiyunling in the future and it will be my guest of Dou Yan. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, Dou Shanshan wants to go wrong. I am not a big official. Dou Yan asked in a low voice. Is Brother Chow the Qinggu of the great Li Qin Tianjian? Qin Pingon still shook his head and quickly caught a bass, grabbed it and gently tossed it into the fish basket. Dou Yan clapped his hands and applauded. Brother Chow is lucky. Seems that he is really related to jumping the Bo River. For the sake of friends, this Doushan god really doesn't want any old face. In fact, in the past, no matter it was a colleague of the Shanshui officialdom, or even the top boss in charge of the landscape of dozens of prefectures and counties, Dou Yan, the superintendent of the city god, had never been so humbled and smiled. It was determined that this good-looking Master Chow was an official of the Ministry of Industry from Cheer Street or Ichi Lane, Dali capital. Dali officials, regardless of whether they are big or small, are difficult to deal with. For example, the river diversion, many mountain shrines, temples, rivers and water houses, including Daiyunling, and those who had prepared wines and accompany wine beauties, were not able to send in at the end of the day. Those Dali officials will not be guests at all, but they are still very caring about the specific implementation of their official duties, performing their duties in an orderly manner, and doing things in a very organized manner. What kind of people, what kind of friends? Qin Pingon knew it in his heart and asked in his heart. I heard that Sun Hebo has not many friends. Except for the Dou Shan there are only a handful. I don't know if there is an old man named Cui among his friends? No. The old man's surname is Cui. He is a pure martial artist. I don't know. I haven't had much contact with people from Jianghu. Qin Pingon continued. The old man Cui once taught me boxing with great care, but he felt that my qualifications were not good, so he was officially confiscated as a disciple, so I can only be regarded as an anonymous boxing apprentice of old Cui. At the Luopa Mountain Bamboo House, the old man never talked about the past with Qin Pingan, like things like Cui Qing and Daoist and Wenqian being friends, or the old man chatting with Nuanshu and others. Qin Pingan passed the right guardian of Luopa Shan. Only by hearing God's whistleblowing can we know it. Strangely speaking, Cui Qing has never had a good face on Qin Pingan's side, but on the side of Nuanshu and Xiaomi Li he is very amiable. Sun Wenqian was silent for a moment. Master Zhou Xian can really joke. On a mountain who has accomplished a lot of cultivation went to practice boxing and learn some martial arts. Is it a waste of time and material? Isn't Master Chow afraid that his family and the elders in the mountains complain about not doing their jobs? Obviously, compared with the previous question and answer, this Hebo was more concise and concise. Qin Pingon caught a golden base again, threw his rod into the water again and smiled. There are no elders in the family. As for going up the mountain to practice, there are guides, but they also don't have the status of master or apprentice, so he claimed to be a casual cultivator. It's not the younger generation deliberately attacking people. Sun Wenqian smiled and asked, "How does it feel to learn boxing for a cultivator?" Qin Pingon said softly, "Learning boxing is not easy, especially Mr. C's teaching boxing is so hard that people regret learning boxing." Sun Wenqian sighed. Then it can't be faked. This hidden young official of Dali is mostly really an anonymous disciple of Cui Cheng. Cui Cheng's attitude towards martial arts is exactly the same as his rigorous attitude towards family and academic affairs. Sun Wenqian asked, "Since Master Chao claims to be an anonymous disciple, can Cui Cheng's one-piece boxing technique have any success?" Qin Pingon smiled and replied, "I have a great disciple who is a pioneer in martial arts. He has a better aptitude to practice martial arts. He was lucky enough to be accepted as a direct disciple. It's just that Mr. Cui does not stick to the trivial, and each is considered to be his own generation." Sun Wenqian nodded. It was something Cui Cheng had done. Qin Pingon asked, "Mr. Cui will also sing harmony with Sun Hebo's poems?" Sun Wenqian smiled and said, "Of course, Cui Cheng's academic talents are very good, and he can be regarded as a literary scholar. When I first met him, Cui Cheng was still a young scholar who had studied abroad. Douyin still doesn't know. Cui Cheng's true identity has always been mistaken for the reading seeds of a distinguished family in a small country." Sun Wenqian introduced, "Lao Dou, Master Zhou Xian is an anonymous disciple of Cui Cheng." Douyin questioned, "Which Cui Cheng?" Sun Wenqian smiled, "It's the poor scholar who has to drink with you every time I pass by." Douyin laughed and said, "Oh, it means that little Cui I remember. Why don't I remember? I have seen it a few times, but that little Cui has a high vision only close to Sun Hebo. Every time he only knows to cheat from me." Liqueur. Then Dou Shanshan found that the face and eyes of the young official from Dali were a little strange. Douyin questioned, "What's wrong? Don't call him what Xiao Tui shouted. The age difference between the two parties is 200 to 300 years. Is it possible that I have to call him Brother Cui? That's too hypocritical." Qin Pingon stared at the river in a daze. The river is as blue as the sky, the perch is just like hanging in a mirror, and if you are not near the cloud, you are by the side of wine. It turned out to have been young. Just like that old mother. This is an unimaginable thing. Just like Mr. Qi, Cui Cheng and old mothers did to Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon is of Pei Qian, Chao Sunny and Zhao Shu under them. Li Baoping, Pei Qian and Li Huai are among the children of Bai Xian and the dumb boy in Qilong Lane. And those children who are still young today might also be seniors who are beyond the imagination of the descendants of Luopashan and the next sect. Probably this is what passed on from generation to generation. Qin Pingon squatted by the river and shook the two bass in the fish basket into the river. After putting away the fishing rod and fish basket, he got up and took out a white bowl from his sleeve, changed his name and said with a smile, "Mr. Tsin, in the case of Daoist diversion, the younger generation is outside the Dali officialdom and cannot change anything. But is Mr. Tsin willing to take a step back and do not need to replace the Jinshan Temple and Hiboshi Mansion, just around here as Yihu and Hebo?" The man was speechless. Dou Shanshan heard it in a cloud of mist. Sun Wenqian transfers to Hebo? But where are the lakes within hundreds of miles? Yeah, you want to move mountains to build lakes. Young people really regard themselves as old gods of the 5 realms, have the supreme magic power to move mountains and seas? 10,000 steps back, even if you can move the unowned remnants of a few mountains, and then dig a large pit from the ground to carry the lake water, where the water comes from, it can't be the bridge that builds the river and the water flows in the sky. Dragging the Per River into the lake? Besides, it's a dry season and the Diaobo River does not have enough water. What's more, if you really want to act so recklessly, the landscape will affect the people on both sides of the strait. This will affect the people's autumn harvest this year. At that time, the Dali court will surely inquire, even if Dali is accompanied by the capital. The Ministry of Industry in Beijing can make an exception. The diversion of rivers is a foregone conclusion after all. Even if the new lake is built, it will still be the embarrassing situation of the unsourced water. The water transport of the lake is deadly and the waters of the old Diaobo River. The descendant spirit will never follow Tsin Hebo to relocate to a stagnant pool. At that time, Tsin Wenqian will still be a lonely person with the burning incense, so what's the point of this move? Young and vigorous, I don't know what to say. But having said that, this kindness is something to be grasped. Tsin Wenqian smiled and shook her head and said, Master Chao doesn't need to be so thankless, and he will lose the spiritual energy and official connections in vain. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Roam the younger generation to say something without embarrassment. This matter is not difficult at all, and it is like just a drink at the wine table. Dou Shanshan smiled with a heartfelt voice. When Qian look, does this look and tone look like the Pauper Cui Qing back then? The juniors will go back. King Shank took the bowl with one hand, just took a step and disappeared in an instant, thousands of miles away. Dou Yen used the magical powers of a mountain god, and after taking back his mind he was shocked and said, Good fellow, it is no longer in the boundary of Daiyunling. Soon after wearing the blue shirt he returned to the Diaobo River, still holding a white bowl but an extra bowl of water. Dou Yen was greatly disappointed. The thunder was heavy and the rain was little? How much water can such a big white bowl hold even if the immortal family magic is used? Not as much water as a leaping river, right? What's the picture if you don't want to be near and far? But Tsin Wenqian looked solemn and asked, Master Chao borrowed water from Dadu? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, Run a little bit farther and change the place to fetch water. Tsin Wenqian asked, But the sea water? Qin Pingon nodded and said, Mr. Tsin can rest assured that although the water is taken near the sea entrance, the younger generation has already gone to the mud to clear it. For the time being, the water is clearer than the river that can't jump, but in the future the water transportation products will not be too bad. This a bowl of water, the amount of water is adequate, enough to support a 300 li days lake. Tsin Wenqian was speechless. This is called acceptable? Legend has it that ancient immortals have the East China Sea in their sleeves. Dou Yan's eyes widened and he craned his neck to look at the bowl of white water. Isn't the young man bragging and not writing drafts? Qin Pingon handed the white bowl full of water to Tsin Wenqian and said with a smile, Mr. Tsin and Mr. Cui met once and friendship between gentlemen is as pale as water. Tsin Wenqian was not a pedantic person and took the water bowl openly. After Tsin Wenqian took the non-heavy bowl of water, Qin Pingon looked at the surrounding landscapes, with his fingers close together without the need for talisman paper, drew arcs and talisman, drew a circle, first defined the territory and then turned his palm. In an instant the mountains and rivers vibrated and a few miles away from the Tiaobo River at the border with Dayun Ridge, the boundary of 300 miles sank in an instant, but during the period, all the spiritual beings were shaken by the sleeves of the green shirts, and the clouds were driving fog. Was shaken off to the upper bank of the Tiaobo River and then gently grasped. The collapsed mountain roots condensed into a mustard seed-sized earth ball, held in Qin Pingon, and once again used his fingers to draw symbols to learn from that fairy hairpin the city and Lu Shen are one person and one symbol. The water characters and the mountain characters are drawn on the bottom of the daking and the earth ball in the hands respectively. In the future, the big lake and Daiyunling will form an embryonic pattern of interdependence between mountains and waters. Superb skill. A river uncle and a mountain god facing such a method of moving mountains and rivers are still unheard of, so that the golden bodies of the two landscape gods shook, and their minds swayed uncontrollably. What kind of Master Chao? It is appropriate to say that it is Chao Xianren and Chao Xianjun. Qin Pingon handed the pocket earth ball the size of an apricot to Dou Yen and smiled, Brother Dou, meet in Ping Shui, it's good to see him and he will ask for a drink later. This mountain character can be placed at the root of the mountain. In the future the rustic will grow and it will be beneficial to the mountain transport in Daiyunling. As for Daiyunling and the lakes and mountains in the future, there is no need to worry about the conflict between the mountains and the water, only the two will be stable. Dou Yen took the weird earth ball that was said to be a mountain character. It was actually a stagger and he almost failed to catch it. The mountain god's face immediately blushed. Dou Yen glanced at Tsin Hebo who was holding the bowl easily. He was strange, why only he was the one who made the fool out of it. Qin Pingon said, Wait a moment, I have to write a temporary letter and Brother Lao Dou will hand it over to the Dadu Changchunhao. I and this old Tiefu river god of water are half of the same town. Today's movement here, maybe Changchunhao can help me explain something at the companion capital and the Ministry of Engineering. Between words, Qin Pingon twisted his wrist and took out the pen and paper from his sleeve. The paper was hung in the air and the mist filled with water. It became a mysterious landscape restriction. Qin Pingan quickly wrote a secret letter and wrote it to the man who filled the gap. The content of the letter, Yang Hua, the of water of Changchun Ho, is all polite, which roughly explains the reasons for the changes in the boundary of the Tiaobo River today. The last sentence is the key point. It is nothing but the hope that this Changchun Ho will be able to do so in the future. Under the premise, take care of the Shendian of Dayunling Mountain. Just like every Daoist mountain monarch in Haoranjiuzhou will also govern many rivers, so the Dada Lord who is in a high position has many mountains within his jurisdiction. Qin Pingan finally took out a personal seal which was printed, Qin 11. He picked up the seal, sighed towards the bottom 3 characters and put it at the end of the letter. This is the first time that Qin Pingan has used the seal that has been collected for many years to formally seal a letter. In the future correspondence between Luopishan and other mountains, as long as it is the handwriting of the owner of the mountain, Qin Pingan, either the seal Luopishan Qin Pingan, or this party's, Qin 11. This is the proper etiquette on the mountain. Qin Pingan put the letter in an envelope and handed it to Zhou Xian. Finally, he clasped his fists and smiled with the two of them. Mr. Tsun, brother Dou, the younger generation is still in a hurry, don't pass this, the mountains are high and there will be a period of time later. Sun Wenqian and Dou Yen returned the gifts. Dou Yen sighed, Wenqian, this time am drenched in your light. Heaven is great fortune just come. Well-deserved fairy handwriting, understatement created such incredible fairy trails. Sun Wenqian smiled and said nothing. Dou Yen suddenly asked, Huh? Sun Wenqian, do you remember the face of that Chao Xianjun? Sun Wenqian frowned slightly, shook her head and said, I really don't remember. Dou Yen said with emotion, What kind of thing is this? The immortals on the top of the mountain really cannot be guessed by common sense. Sun Wenqian whispered, There is nothing hard to understand, it's nothing more than a gentleman showing kindness without repaying it. If he didn't guess wrong in that letter, the mysterious green shirt guest would definitely ask Changchun Ho Yanghua not to leak his words on Dou Yan's side. Dou Shanshan carefully put the mountain character in his sleeve, wiped his face vigorously and was about to speak. The golden body vibrated again and his whole body was radiant. It was not only Dou Yan's Dayun Ridge, but the mist rose and the colorful clouds lingered. There is also this Tiaobo River, which is obviously the season of summer and autumn, and countless apricot flowers bloom on both sides of the river, just like the spring breeze. Sun Wenqian said softly, It's because of the 4-character admonition of mountain high and water long. Dou Yen trembled. Couldn't it be a moral saint who speaks Tianxian? Sun Wenqian was silent. Dou Yen scratched his head. What is going on? Sun Wenqian smiled and joked. It's not just that I know Cui Qing, don't you also know Xiao Cui? Suddenly, Dou Yen suddenly realized that he was staggered before. Could it be that Chao Xianjun, who respectfully calls Cui Qing the old gentleman, is taking a bite of his grudge against him? Dou Yen asked, I didn't ask Cui Qing what happened. I only know that this old friend has violated the ban several times and left the jurisdiction of Tiaobo River without authorization. If it weren't for Xiao Xiaohe, he has belonged to the lowest rank of the water in the world, and there is nothing to be relegated to, otherwise Sun Wenqian would have been demoted again and again. The official hat is only worn down, but Sun Wenqian doesn't talk about official promotion anymore. The Zhou Qinghuang directly talks to the Tiaobo River Shuifu. The annual Qinghuang temple will be clicked. No need a small temple. I can't afford to wait for you, Tsundasui God. Sun Wenqian looked sad. In the look of the green shirt guest, there is an answer long ago, so why bother to ask more? Qin Pingan then took a trip to May Glazed Country, but he failed to meet the crazy drunkard's young county lieutenant in that familiar county seat. He originally wanted to repeat the old tricks, and once again bought some cursive scripts with the county lieutenant. After inquiring about the copybook with the county government, I realized that the county lieutenant had already resigned and traveled north. That deal back then was really a bargain. Qin Pingan bought a large pile of cursive copybooks with only Wuxian distilled spirits, and the writing was both radiant and rigorous. Qin Pingan's own handwriting is mediocre, but he recognizes his appreciation level and doesn't lose to the calligraphy masters at the foot of the mountain. What's more, even Zhu Lian and Cui Dongshan talk about cursive calligraphy, and even they can't imitate the 7 or 8 points. It really can't be higher. Cui Dongshan said directly that each of these cursive copybooks can be used as heirlooms. The longer the year, the more valuable it is. Even Mr. Wei Dashan has a dead skinny face and asked Qin Pingon to take a copy of the Immortal Steps. In fact, there are less than 3 copybooks. The cross is completed in one go. The Immortal Steps are too weak, the crimson clouds are growing under his feet, the smallpox is scattered by wind and rain, the jade slips printed in dragon mud, the real text is refined by the fire. The master's method is better than Weibo and he doesn't ask for it. He just went to the first floor of the bamboo building and borrowed a copybook from Xiao Wanshu, saying that he had to post a few more times, otherwise he would rarely get his cursive spirit. Qin Pingon later returned to Luapa Mountain, and when he learned of this he sent out the copybook on his own initiative. The cultivator also said in a serious manner that this is so embarrassing, that a gentleman does not take advantage of others. Chao Sunny was just there at the time and he said, "I can help the teacher return this monk under the moon sticker to her husband." Qin Pingon bought a few jars of locally brewed Wui wine in Chishui city of Shujian Lake. Coincidentally, it didn't make a book. Drinking Wui wine, I remembered the ascended ghost repairer who just met, the master of Xuanpu, the city lord of the fairy hairpin who happened to be called Wui. Fan Yen, the young city lord of Chishui city who had only one seedling, has always been regarded as a foolish fool. Now he has become the city lord. He has also attached to the Dali court, enabling Chishui city to grow stronger under the eyelids of the True Realm sect. Is such a hero who once faced Guken, who was a big boy and took a mouthful of Guken. Qin Pingon was walking by the water, and looking back he saw a prosperous restaurant in the distance. It seems that for the first time in life and the only time to set up a wine bureau it was over there. At the banquet that day, Guken was actually more familiar than Qin Pingon, a half-year-old child chatting and laughing with eyebrows flying. When Jiang Shangzhen was still in charge he set aside 5 islands from the Shujian Lake where the Xinjing sect was located, and gave them to Luapa Mountain, but this enclave was hung under the name of a young monk named Zenji. Jiang Shangzhen didn't bother with any discussion of the Patriarch's Hall, he decided in one word. Who has objections to this? Wei Ying, who can count his half-son? At that time the chief worshipped Lu Laoqing? Or Lu Zhimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang who was enshrined in the second seat? Or is it Li Fuyu? The Emperor Han Jingling in Shihao Kingdom on the north side of the book slips, because he had not practiced the Taoism, was nearly half 100 years old, and he was already showing a bit of old age. Today, after retiring from the court, I had a leisure time, and then started to play the old tune of a pair of grandchildren again, and over again is the wording, the Luapa Shenshin Genxian. I invited me to have a drink back then. These are not us anymore. No matter how good guys don't talk about the courage of the year, this story of the old man must also be mentioned. As for becoming the emperor that year, Han Jingling began to his tale, and went to Xianxia Island with Huang He and asked to sit in the accounting room, but was stopped by Gu Kan. At that time the two sides were actually not too quarrelsome. Pleasant, it's just that Gu Kan at that moment was like a different person. The city mansion was deep and didn't show it on his face. What to mention these trivial things? It's not the kind of casually throwing pots of Xinjia wine, it's a serious wine bureau with a large table of wine and dishes. Just ordinary drinks. The doorway here, you children don't understand if it's the wine on the mountain, on the contrary it's boring. With these old almanacs, the two children had long been hearing calluses, shaking their heads and making faces at each other. A child opened his mouth early and said silently, helping the emperor's grandfather to say the words that he brought to the end every time. At that time I was sitting on it. Qin Pingon only took 2 steps, making a trip back and forth between Shihaguo and Shijianhu. And he didn't bother with Han Jingling's words that added fuel and jealousy. Bragging is not against the law, let alone an emperor. After that she quietly went to Miaoliu Island and found Li Fuyuan. She recruited an anonymous disciple from a small place called Xianyu County, Guichuanxi, who had poor practice aptitude, but Li Fuyuan taught Taoism. The direct disciple still has to pay attention. Seeing Qin Pingon, Li Fuyu was surprised. Qin Pingon asked about Zenji's practice, and Li Fuyu naturally knew everything he could say. The two sides talked to Gao Mian by the way. It turned out that Li Fuyu served as an offering to the Invincible Fist gang after watching the ceremony at the Luapa Mountain, not Kaching. Gao Mian has stepped down as the gang leader. This old gang leader who has fallen from the Yupu realm twice before was almost interrupted by a big demon on the battlefield near Dadu. He fell again and only barely saved it. In the Golden Core realm, it's hard to be able to compete with others in this life. As a result, when Li Fuyu participated in the first meeting of the Zhuxiang meeting there, he saw a scene of saliva splashing and two people akimbo spraying each other. Two groups of people were arguing over there, not arguing whether to change the name of the mountain. It's about arguing about which new name is better. After all, a serious monk sect has adopted a bad name that even the Jianghu sect can't take. In the early years, if it weren't for the fact that the old gang leader was still strong, he couldn't beat and scolded, otherwise the matter would have been put on the agenda. On the side of Zhenjingzong, where can you see this kind of scene, the three sect masters Jiang Shangzhen, Wei Ying and Lu Laoqing are very convincing. The True Realm sect is also quite powerful, and in such a short period of time, three suzerains have appeared one after another. At the beginning, Li Fuyu was quite worried whether the old Gao's gang leader would be greatly lost because of this. The hero was short of breath, but the result was not the case at all. When Li Fuyu found Gao Mian, the old man was in high spirits and it turned out to be positive. Fairy Su Jia of Yangshan has been reincorporated into the ancestral genealogy of the Patriarch Hall. Sun Yuan, nicknamed the One-Foot Gun, nicknamed Yumian Zilangjian, another name of the Wuxia Gao, and the dragon who saw the head and the tail collapse, the true monarch. These few rich people are all famous on the mountain. The hawks, claiming to hold up half of the sky and half of the country, was beaten down by a few of them together. I don't know how many fairies have earned a lot of money from these few people. In addition, there is an unknown deer who is named Xiabatio in the waves. He does not spend much, but he used a few snowflakes to open his voice and help some deserted fairies to create a kind of thousand. All the troops and horses have fallen under the imposing manner of the pomegranate skirt. Li Fuyu asked. Lord Chen Shan came to Gonglu Island this time. Did you see Sovereign Lu or Master Lu? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, forget it this time. In fact, when Jiang Shangzhen served as the sect master of the True Realm, in addition to the act of public gain for personal gain, he also called the chief to worship Lu Laoqing. The two walked on the path by the lake on Mayanaji Island. Sect Master Jiang casually folded a wicker and smiled. Said a few words to Lu Laoqing. You think that to break the bottleneck of Yupu realm and become an immortal, you have to kill her yourself. This is your own practice and I can't control it. But if you want her to die, I must let you die first. This is my own business, Jiang Shangzhen, and you can't control it either. Lu Laoqing dare not take it seriously. About Mo is the road to heaven, but Lu Laoqing, who had to find another way, successfully entered the fairyland. From the chief worship, he served as the third suzerain in the history of Zhenjingzong after the two sword immortals Jiang Shangzhen and Wei Ying. Qin Pingon took a trip to Xianxia Island afterwards, but not to find Lu Jimao but to the Zhou Xian mansion. The female ghost of Xianxia Island, Hong Su, her true identity is Huang Sha, the female cultivator of Maialu Island of the previous life, and also Lu Leicheng's Daoist companion. A few years ago she resigned as the female officer of Hengbo Mansion and became the concierge of Zhou Xian Mansion again. Because she was still not good at dealing with the intrigue between those women, she really couldn't control more than a dozen maidservants with their own minds, so she resigned from the post, which was quite noble and leisurely and could make a lot of money, returned to Zhou Xian Mansion and continued to give horses to the horses. When the master was the concierge, he shook a string of bells next to the door when he met a visitor. I worked in Hengbo Mansion for a few years and saved a lot of snowflake money. Whenever I was in a bad mood, Hong Su would spend one. From the ugly and penetrating old woman's appearance to the young woman's appearance, seeing myself is not so disgusting. As a result, he cursed the prodigal wife to Master Ma. The ghost of Xiao Ma, who was born as a bear food man, is far and far away. Now he is still in front of the second-class offering of Xianxia Island. If you have a genealogical status, you don't actually need to do anything, just get a salary for nothing every year. This man, who used to be one of the many handymen in the Jingxing stall, has a very humble status, but has a very elegant heart. Gui Xiu named his mansion on Xianxia Island Zhou Xian. The phrase resound Zhou Xian from a rare poem in the old country, sounded a homophonic think, and Lu Chongrun, the owner of the old Zhuchai Island, was the eldest princess of his old country. It's a pity that the long princess Lu Chongrun with a group of Yingying and Yanyan moved out of Shujian Lake a long time ago and settled down on a hill in a foreign land called Clawback. Over the years, Gui Xiu has not cursed Mr. Accountant less. While he said that he had no thoughts, he vowed to say that he had no intentions at all, and would never take the initiative to provoke Her Royal Highness the Princess. On the one hand, he sneaked and kidnapped Her Royal Highness to his hometown. The back of the scorpion, his mother's, the back of the scorpion, the fish, the slippery, the back, the ghost. Just imagine the white and tender back of the long princess. Just want to cry. Having said that, the royal princess is such a stunner, and Qin Pingyan is a young guy who is a little bit weird and crooked, but it's normal. I just don't know if Her Royal Highness the eldest princess hasn't seen herself for so many years across thousands of mountains and rivers. Will she become sick with lovesickness, haggard and thin, so that her small waist becomes more and more slender? For her back then, this ghost really took his life. I gave her my heart long ago. She slept on her heart for many years. Hey, I really want to give the body to Her Royal Highness the Princess too. Today Gui Xiaoma came to the gate of the mansion and wanted to go out, go boating and wander around on Zhuchai Island. If the Princess Long returns here, he will be able to see him at first glance. Isn't it a stalwart figure? The concierge Hong Su courageously asked. Master, does Mr. Qin really become the lord of the Zhongmen Mountain? Ma Yunji stopped and sneered. Can I make money by cheating you? The female ghost said timidly. That can't be. Ma Yunji rubbed his chin. I don't know if the lingering love story between me and the eldest princess has been engraved in a book. Hong Su Yen said. There is also the story of the slave and maidservant. Mr. Qin also copied it down. Ma Yunji stared. You are too stupid to be rescued. In the wealthy township of our Chief Liu's Hangbo mansion, I don't know how to enjoy the blessings, but I want to run to a ghost place like me again as a concierge. I am surprised. It's weird. I really want the colored embryos to be in Hangbo mansion. There are more beautiful women and ants inside, all with and round breasts. If you don't pick your mouth, you won't be jealous, or it's not true. No one wants to come here as an errand. Look just what you look like now, let alone scare people. Ghosts will be scared to life by you. I can't charge you. Why do you have the face to collect my salary every month? Every time it's just a few days delay in the distribution. I'm ashamed to be awkward. Are you a debt collector? Hong Su did not dare to talk back. Master Ma is always not so pleasant to speak. But after all, it's his own master. Ma Yuanji sneered with arms around his chest and said, Next time I see that surname Qin, let's see how I deal with him. Young people don't talk about credit and they are in the world. How about becoming a sword immortal when they become the lord? A blue shirt appeared out of thin air, smiled and asked, What about it? Mayunji took a closer look and laughed loudly. Oh hey, Master Qin is here. On the neighboring islands of Shujian Lake, ghosts and ghosts are gathered together. Almost all of them are devoted to practicing on the island. They don't go out very much. They are not worried about being killed by people when they go out. Just hang the island identity badge and hang on the boundary of Shujian Lake. You can get the identity recognition of both the Zhenjingzong and the Dei garrison if you are in and out of the way. As for the long trip out of the book Jinhu, you need to rely on your own skills. There are also ghosts that are forgotten and they have done some shameless old business. When a conflict arises with the immortal masters on the mountain, if you kill it, you will kill it. However, he even paid a sum of money to Zenji. According to Zhenjingzong, it was done in accordance with the Dali laws of landscape, and the crime was improperly punished. If you are unwilling to give up on this, you can continue to reason with the Dali criminal department. In fact, Zheng Yi was very hesitant at the time. Ma Di's method is better. Ask Master Zhang to go. What good way can you think of when you are Mr. Qin or Gu Kan? Since you don't have that brain, look for someone with a bright brain. Zheng Yi knew very well that the reason why Zhenjingzong and Xianxia Island were willing to treat their uninfluenced ghost repairs and ghosts extraordinarily was actually the credit of Mr. Qin. Zenji, the former boy on Maoyue Island, was born suitable for ghost practice. There were a lot of opportunities. First, he was taken away from the fire pit by Zhang Di, the manager of Xianxia Island, and became the helper of the accountant. Then he followed Gukan all the time. For a few years he has been a cultivator in the Sevuing realm, and now he is a master of the mountain sect. Before Gukan left his hometown for a long trip to the central Tushenzhou, he left the peace card with him. At first he was worried about whether this move was in compliance with the laws of Dali, so he dared not take it out. After all, he used Dali. The Li Xing department has nothing to do, it is a capital crime. Later I learned that Gukan had already done it at the Dali criminal department and moved to Xing Ye's name. This kind of thing, according to Zhang Di, is actually more difficult than earning an innocent card. As for Ma Di, she is a ghost and she has always lived in the fox fur talisman, and she bought a lot of rouge gouache. There are so many weird people and things in Mr. Chen and Gu Can's hometown. Just talking about Mr. Chen's falling down mountain. At that time, Zhenji and Ma Duyi were shocked by a thin girl. They saw with their own eyes a person suddenly fell from the top of a very high cliff, hit the ground hard and hit the ground. Out of countless big pits, a smaller girl squatted on the edge of the big pit with her head in her hands. When the girl settled down, the straw sandals on her feet were full of blood. Later they learned that the dark-skinned girl named Pei Qian was Mr. Chen's disciple. After determining the identities of the two out-of-towners with the girl's unique method, the little girl in black, carrying a golden pole on her shoulders and holding a green bamboo stick, was very cautious at first, and suddenly became lively, saying that we paid money. I'm asking for a fist to give the cerebellum on the ground a big blow. The little girl bounced around, twittering all the way. Anyway, she was talking about how good money is. As a result, Pei Qian held his small head and said with a heartfelt voice, "My sons and daughters of the arena, walking in the arena, just for the sake of being a chivalrous man, not a false name." I was stunned that Zhenji and Ma Duyi, who were also well-informed and hadn't walked away at all, were stunned and looked at each other. Because Zhenji and Ma Duyi are not pure martial arts after all, they didn't know the many subtleties of the girl jumping off the cliff and smashing the ground, let alone understanding the height of the boxing technique of questing the earth with pure physique. Over the years, I have been paying attention to the movements of Mr. Qin and Gu Can. The Xianxia mansion news on the Zhenjingzong side will not be left. It's a pity that Mr. Qin has never heard from him, but it's Gu Can who was in after the parting in Longzhou. They changed their lives from the direct disciple of true monarch Zhejiang Lu Jimao to the disciple of Zhongtu Beidasheng, and he was still that close disciple. For the many wild repairs in Shujian Lake, that mighty city is far away and unattainable. As for the city lord Jing, who was hailed as the world's #1 demon giant, he was even higher in the sky. I was on Xianxia Island in the early years, and whenever I saw Gu Can I would shudder with fear. Later, following Gu Can's travels around, the situation improved. In the end, as long as he was out of the house and even felt that he was by Gu Can's side, he could feel a little more at ease. Ma Di once reminded Xing Yi that in fact Gu Can is still Gu Can. He has indeed changed a lot. He has become obedient and will do many good things within his power. Even many things are done by Gu Can which makes people feel happy and reasonable. He should be happy, but he can't be considered a good person. As for whether Xing Yi really listened to it, Ma Di didn't care. She only identified one thing. As long as Mr. Qin is in the world, Gu Can in the mountains will become better. Even if Gu Can successfully reach the summit of Howren Mountain in the future, there will still be a certain unknown criterion in Gu Can's heart for a long time. In fact, Ma Di felt a little guilty in his heart for the unpleasant remarks he had said to Xing Yi. After all, he traveled around with Gu Can back then. More or less, Ma Di was a little close to Gu Can, so he could be regarded as half a friend. I have to admit that you can stay at ease with Gu Can. It's like walking the rivers and lakes with half of Mr. Qin, just eat and drink carefree. Qin Pingon left Zhou Xian mansion on Xianxia Island and came here, and found that the island owner had been practicing in the house, so he did not disturb the clean repair of the middle 5 gods. Ma Di was swinging in his yard. Going to the top of the island alone, Qin Pingon sat on the railing, drinking slowly and looking at a strange lake with books. I have been wandering around here for several years, but it is also this place that made Qin Pingon understand a truth: the heaven and the earth are heroic, and the ages are still awe-inspiring. Qin Pingon threw an empty jug of black wine into the lake. At that time I was sitting on Jai Heoyi. If it's the big and small wine tables of the Great Wall of Jianqi, that's right. Qin Pingon drank a pot of wine and passed by a place before going to Yunxiu Mountain. Looking at the bleak scene in front of me, it is hard to imagine that this is the Nantang Lake, which was famous in the past. The big lake dried up, and it is said that the water of the lake was drained by the old throne Big Demon. Now the water level is less than 10% of the previous year. A few years ago this place was once a place of victory in Aquarius. Nantang Lake's green plum viewing thatched plum dock has the strongest spring. The scenery is beautiful, and it is reputed to have cultivated this plum blossom by several students. In the 1,000-year Daoist temple, every time the plum blossoms, immortal masters, emperors and generals from other towns, gentry and literati, there are endless traffic, leaving countless poems reciting plum blossoms. In these years, the sisters of the green plum viewer, in addition to expending their spiritual energy, trying their best to use the water method to gather clouds and rain, they have been borrowing water to move water from other rivers in these years, trying to refill a lake. However, these two things are progressing slowly. As soon as the new mountain gods and lands near the tops of the mountains have complained, they can't blame them for acting impartially. After all, it involves the changes in the luck of the mountains, waters and air. Trees are badly damaged, and filling the mountains with water is not a simple matter of replenishing rivers and rivers. Qin Ping'an saw a familiar figure and was doing what she was best at right now, turning on the mirror to make money for the gods. This green plum viewing Zhou Xian is an expert in Jinghua Shuiyue, and he was able to borrow the scenery at his fingertips. In the early years, every time he went to a mountain sect, a fairy family mansion, he would use the secret method of the green plum view to intercept it. And then embedded her figure in the picture and then sent it to those familiar mountain masters and mountain hawks. Last time she visited Longzhou, Zhou Qian was with Song Yuan and Lu Runyan in Yidifeng. At that time, Qin Ping'an happened to be a little black charcoal with a red face. At that time, Zhou Qian did not want to miss any opportunity to become friends with friends of friends, and wanted to use Yidai Peak as a bridge to build a relationship with Luopa Mountain. At that time, Qin Ping'an didn't like her to do things indiscreetly, too deliberately, and it was easy to get her clothes on the top. He felt that she was too snobbish and there was nothing wrong with her contacts, but there was nothing like her who was not careful, so she declined up. After the two parties were separated, what Pei Qian told Qin Ping'an secretly, but it shocked his mind. Pei Qian said at the time that she saw in the heart of my sister, there were so many poor little people living in torn clothes. They were just like me when I was a child. They were so thin that they were almost starving to death. My sister was very sad, facing a big empty rice bowl. She didn't dare to look at the children. At that time, Pei Qian, who was still a child, didn't quite understand his unintentional words, which would make Master always reflect on it in the future life. At this moment, Qin Ping'an was leaning against a withered plum tree, looking at that mirrored scene. Turning around, somehow he had something to do with his own Luopa Mountain. It turned out to be a matter of observing the ceremony, and there was a lot of turmoil up and down the mountains on Izhou, and there were countless talks. The younger the trainer is, the more disapproving he is. He has a very bad impression of the young sword fairy who has shown himself in the limelight. He relies on his realm, is arrogant and domineering, and does not leave any room for things. In fact, Zhou Qian didn't think about how to say good things to Luopa at the beginning. It was just because of habit. After chatting a few words that he was fortunate to be acquainted with that Xianxia, thinking that he would raise one's worth by this. It was a simple Jianghu road counting. It was a blunder to fry the pot at once, but it made people spend a lot of snow money and said some strange things to that fairy Zhou. Why did you recognize the father of Luopa and like to be a filial son? Suddenly someone followed up with the money and made a mistake, missed a word. We Zhou Xian, maybe we have recognized a wealthy godfather. Zhou Qian didn't care at all. With the same smile, as long as those guys spent money to scold others, she would be very happy. There was only one sentence back to great-grandchildren and you were all right. Qin Ping'an could tell that she really didn't care. After she took off the mirror, she shook her fist gently, cheered herself up. She understood. She found a way to make money, and next time she will continue to move out of the young sword fairy who can't beat her. It's best. If the relationship between the two parties is more obscure, you can definitely make more money. I believe that with Qin Ping'an's current prominent status, how could he care about something with her, a young budding monk? It's just that when Zhou Qian looked at the shallow Nantang Lake, she was a little at a loss. Even if she could refill a Nantang Lake, how about so many dead plum trees? There was also the abundant water transport in the old Nantang Lake. She was desperate and burst into tears. It seems that life is always a bit bumpy and I can't get through it no matter how hard it is. Even if it passes, it is only people, not things. Zhou Qian suddenly looked up, his face full of incredible. It turned out that in the blink of an eye, there was a vision of black clouds rolling. The sea of clouds gathered in an instant. The lightning flashed and thundered without the slightest sign. The weather was severe and thrilling. The sea of clouds envelopes the land of hundreds of miles in the waters of the old Nantang Lake, and day is like night. The heavy rain fell to the world, and the water level of Nantang Lake began to rise rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. The robe on her body can shed water, but she doesn't mind the heavy rain. Qin Ping'an hesitated for a moment, did not leave quietly but laughed out. It happened to pass by the expensive land. By coincidence, I have to thank Fairy Zhou for saying a few words about Luopa for nothing. Zhou Qian, who had a guilty conscience, immediately turned his head. wiped the tears on his face and cast a blessing on the fallen mountain sword fairy and smiled. I have seen Lord Xian. Qin Pingon said, I just happened to pass by and encountered such a vision of heaven and earth. Although I didn't see the legendary Qingmei scenic spot, it was a worthwhile trip. Zhou Xian blinked. Since the young sword fairy didn't want to tell the truth, she had no choice but to pretend to be stupid. Otherwise, how can there be so many coincidences in the world? In fact, in her impression, this young mountain lord has a very ordinary look and feel, very upright and not approachable at all. Later, the shocking ceremony and questioning the sword made Zhou Xian even more determined that he should not have anything to do with Luopishan in this life. As for why Xianxia acted in this way today, she couldn't understand and she was too lazy to think about it. Anyway, she wouldn't have taken a fancy to her appearance. Otherwise she would not be turned away back then. What's more, what is she fancy, what is she afraid of? As long as she can really help King Miguan restore her former style, she is not afraid of anything and what she does is voluntary. A city orphan who was crawling in the mud ditch, was able to be brought to Qingmei Temple by the master at the age of a girl, and finally transformed into a on the mountain to be blessed and to be grateful to pay off his debts. Qin Pingon smiled. If Fairy Zhou doesn't dislike it, you can visit us at Luopa Mountain in the future, and then open the mirror in the mountains and the money earned from the gods will be divided into 5 to 5. How about? But let's say in advance there are several places on the mountain. The place is not suitable for shooting. What's the specific situation? We should wait for Zhou Xianzi to go to Longzhou. Then let our Nuanshu take care of things as well as the right guardian of Luopishan. Let's take you around and take a look around and choose suitable landscapes. Zhou Qianlin nodded blankly, a little in disbelief. Qin Pingon took out the Bigly Innocence card and used it again. I can help explain the several mountain gods near Nantang Lake. It's their business to listen. Zhou Qianlin once again sincerely thanked him. Qin Pingon continued. In addition to water transport and plum trees, I may be able to help a little bit, and Zhou Xianzi can watch the changes in the future. After a tug-of-war with Fei Fei, the self in the wild world got some water transportation in the river. As for King Meiguan's dead plum trees, naturally there is a way to remedy it. After all, I was fortunate enough to meet the old owner of the mountain plum garden, Mrs. Yan Yan. Zhou Qianlin wanted to say something but stopped. I really want to ask the young sword fairy, what is he doing like this? Qin Pingon finally smiled and said, I have to continue on my way. I will stay here soon. If I can pass by here next time, I will definitely go to King Miguan with empty hands as a guest and ask for a bowl of iced plum soup. Zhou Qianlin smiled and nodded slightly. After the figure in the green shirt disappeared, he raised the back of his hand and rubbed his red eyes. Some warmth, more shocking than thunder. Sword of Coming Chapter 872. Mengliang Country. The Sea of Clouds in Wuxia Mountain is the most prestigious scenery of Xianxia in Aquarius Island. Especially when the Sea of Clouds is illuminated by sunlight, it is not just golden, but aura rises, and the colorful colors are so gorgeous that it is praised by Qi practitioners. Stunner in the sky. Otherwise, it will not be able to be included in the best-selling book of Jiazus Mountains and Seas, and those unpredictable clouds and mists at certain moments, with a little real spirit, transformed into the ancestors of the past dynasties, the disciples of Wuxia Mountain. As long as they are destined, they can follow words, ask the patriarchs for advice on this method. Qin Pingon stood on the Sea of Clouds, looking at the distant capital of Mengliang Country, turning the country's vitality into a panoramic view. There used to be a small wine shop in Daoist Mountain. It was a broken yellow beam. It means that after drinking wine, you can get a dream of yellow beams. I just don't know that it has nothing to do with this dream country. Retracted his gaze and looked at a low mountain that was not over the top of the mountain by the Sea of Clouds. Wuxia Mountain has a total of 16 peaks so far, and the female ancestor Kai Jinjian of the Green Cypress Peaks is sitting on a futon today, with purple smoke curling from the incense burner, holding an old bamboo and wood rui in her hand. She is giving classes as usual. Towards the end, she began to explain the characters for those juniors from the sect, and she was solving a fate character at the moment. According to Kai Jinjian's understanding, life is the word. Can be dismantled into humans one knock. Therefore, people will cultivate Taoism as soon as they tap a pass. Cultivating the Tao and asking the heart, life is at stake, life and death. If a monk cannot be tired of foreign objects and corpses, He will see De Luotian when he opens his eyes. In the 16 peaks, including the Xianxia mountain Zhou mountain, all the ancestors who are qualified to open the peaks will follow the ancestral rules and open the preaching on time. It can't be said that there is no view of the door. Of course, some key practice tricks will also be private. If it is not the original line, it is secret, but compared to the general Xian family sect, it has been considered very enlightened. Some ancestors speak well, but unfortunately they are boring. Some ancestors are interesting in speech, but they are often eloquent and digress. They often talk about landscape anecdotes and fairy anecdotes within an hour, but there are not many anyway. Speaking of the idea, the disciples of Biefeng listened happily, but there are many difficulties in practice: how to be ignorant before entering the class, and how to get confused after going out. And Kai Jinjian's Green Jade Peak is overcrowded every time she preaches, because Kai Jinjian's lecture not only talks about the leisurely and interesting things like this kind of literary explanation, but also because she has detailed explanations and understandings of the practice barriers, and has no selfishness. Kai Feng, the master of preaching, has something to say, and the density is proper, and he is ashamed of it. In fact, what Kai Jinjian really made the old monk Zhu Feng feel inferior was her preaching and teaching karma. She regarded the disciples of Wei Feng as the direct inheritance of the original line. It seems that as long as it is the disciple of Xianxia mountain, even if it is not the outer door of the ancient teacher, disciple Kai Jinjian still treats everyone equally, and doesn't mind the spread of the original vein technique of green juniper. A good green hill and green cypress, Danxia dense fog surrounded by the fairy house. The hostess of this mountain is refreshing and energetic with the wind under the woods, and she is so celestial. In fact, it was not a small accident that Kai Jinjian chose to build a mansion on the green juniper peak, because this peak has been left out in Xianxia mountain for many years. It is not surprising whether it is the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, or the scenery of the mountains and waters. It is not that there is no better mountain for her to choose. But Kai Jinjian selected this peak alone. Qin Pingan's vision shifted slightly. On the top of a mountain like an island on the sea, there was a young Jindan Dixian sitting on a white jade railing, as if he was borrowing wine to soothe his sorrows. Relying on the robe on the opponent, he recognized him as Huang Zhongho, who cultivated Yunfeng in Yunxia mountain. Before they formed their own alchemy, Huang Zhongho and Kai Jinjian were once recognized as golden boys and jade girls, and they most hoped to become a pair of gods and Daoists in Yunxia mountain. The robe on his body is a treasure of Xinshan that has been passed down for a long time, named Tilwan. Qin Pingan's imperial wind fell on the top of Gingyun Peak. Huang Zhongho turned a blind eye to this, and he was too lazy to pursue the impolite behavior of a foreigner who did not go to the mountain gate. The young fairy just drank on his own, but no longer looked at Zushan infatually. Xinjia Mansion. Qin Pingan sat on the railing and took out a pot of wui wine. Huang Zhongho turned his head and glanced at the flask in his hand, shook his head and said, "This wine is not good." Huang Zhongho twisted his wrist, and there was an extra pot of Yangxiashan Chuankuan wine, which he threw to the uninvited guest who did not know. "Drink mine." Qin Pingan took the hip flask, thanked him, lifted the mud seal, and drank a big sip of wine with his head up. Heaven and earth, a wine urn, are all drunk folks. Huang Zhonghao's self-registration number, Gung Yunfeng Huang Zhongho. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Lopashen Qin Pingan." Huang Zhongho almost squirted out a sip of wine, raised the back of his hand to wipe the corner of his mouth, turned his head and looked at the man, looking from left to right. Nothing was right. He was not the young sword fairy from the fallen mountain, but he was dressed in costume and he was pretty good at drawing a gourd. "Make do," Huang Zhongho said with a smile. "Friends of Taoism are not authentic, and I was blinded by this pot of good wine. After drinking the wine I'll get out." Qin Pingan asked with a smile. "I was more curious when I went to the Lizhu cave to look for opportunities. Why is Fairy Kai instead of the better qualified Huang brother?" Yunxia Mountain Qi practitioner, the root of monasticism is to subdue the heart ape and tether the immortal horse. At the beginning, Kai Jinjian traveled through the Lizhu cave, seeking magic weapons and other external objects, but also seeking a chance for the fairy family. It's a pity that Kai Jinjian at that time didn't even seem to figure out what the heart is. In Qin Pingan's view, even if the young land immortal with excellent Jindan weather is in love, Huang Zhongho is more suitable to go down the mountain to try his luck than Kai Jinjian in those days. Huang Zhonghe held the hip flask in both hands and twitched the corner of his mouth. This fellow Taoist pretending to be a sword immortal and still pretending to be addicted? Drink quickly or I'm going to drive people. Drink 1 pot and spit 2 pots. The contemporary mountain owner of Xianxia Mountain is a female ancestor who does not like to show her face. In addition, 2 ancestors who are really in charge of things. One is in charge of the laws of the mountain gate, and the other is in charge of the treasure house of money. Kai Jinjian's teacher is the one who is in charge of the money, and Huang Zonghao's preacher is the Xianxia Mountain. The former has spared no effort in the cultivation of Kai Jinjian. It is simply a desperate bet. At the beginning, Xianxia Mountain collected a bag of gold and copper coins and went to Lizhu Cave to find opportunities. There was a big noisy argument and the better qualified. Huang Zhonghe was obviously a more suitable candidate, but Huang Zhonghe himself was not interested in it, so he persuaded Master to forget it. But when he got outside the mountain, Huang Zhonghe was another face when he was dealing with people. When Kai Jinjian was empty-handed during the 2 years when she returned to the mountain gate for some reason, it seemed that her Taoism was severely damaged. She practiced the magical powers of the gate and was in a state of being absent-minded and half-dead about everything. The preaching teacher who had troubled her was so blinded at the patriarch hall, and every time she discussed matters she had to be full with breezy words. Unexpectedly, it didn't take long for Kai Jinjian to suddenly open up his mind. He learned by analogy and climbed up to the heights. The power was like a broken bamboo. First he closed the door and closed the golden core. After that, even some of the Xianxia Mountain ancestors were helpless in practice. So that Xianxia Mountain counts Dao Patriarch's superior skills, to be able to complete a lot. Kai Jinjian's preaching mentor immediately raised his eyebrows. One time when the mentor and disciple talked, the old man revealed his secret, saying that he had chosen her as the protagonist at a glance, and he had helped her calculate a hexagram, signed it and got a horoscope, broken. Standing thereafter like a divine help. After hearing this, Kai Jinjian just smiled and said nothing. Of course Huang Zhonghe didn't mention a word about these secrets of his own. He likes to drink, but he wouldn't be so close to an outsider after drinking such a little bit of wine. I never thought that the green-shirt foreigner laughed and said, "Spit out 2 pots and drink 2 pots? If you treat guests like this, you will be very polite and then behave." Huang Zhonghe was surprised because I heard Kai Jinjian once said that the young people on the side of Lizhu Cave are simple and subtle, and they can talk more than one. The man next to him is a bit interesting to talk. Is it true that he is a young man from that small town? Qin Pingon glanced at the summit of the ancestor Shandan and changed the subject. It seems that even if Fairy Kai is among the Yuanjing, he will help Xianxia Mountain invisibly gather a group of people and luck, but the luck of the mountain gate is still leaking. 30 years have passed, and you still haven't been able to find a treasure of Xinshan that can bring you luck? If you continue to consume it like this, be careful to fall into the fate of a golden jade. A Xianxia Mountain, 10,000 hills and thousands of rocks, a pale mountain home. Cloth robe and straw sandals, the dwelling is true and refreshing, leisurely watching the flowing water and falling flowers. The root of Shanmen Taoism is to train Qi practitioners to enter the realm of refreshing mind and body. Seek a cloud and lock the fog, understand clearly and cultivate cloud and water emotions. In the end, the 3 mountains are my home. Huang Zhonghe raised his hand and rubbed his forehead. This guy has a good tone. At that time, the Dali dynasty selected a group of earth immortals to ascend to the platform. Kai Jinjian of Xianxia Mountain happened to be on the list, and her performance was quite unexpected. Originally, several ancestors of her family were not optimistic about her. They thought Kai Jinjian could be among the golden cores. It was surprising enough to open the peak in Xianxia Mountain. I think she will be able to become the nascent soul in this life. Unexpectedly, Kai Jinjian was once again impressive. Supporting it to the end, she caught a glimpse of the heavenly gate. You must know that even among the talented monks, all of them are considered to be the most top-notch cultivating embryos in Aquarius Island, such as Xia Ling of Longquan Jianzong, Lu Baqiao of Fenglei Garden. At that time it was Sui right side of Zhenjingzong monk. Yunlin Jiang's Jiang Yun etc. picked up a genius which was not a genius that Kai Jinjian could match. Afterwards, it was proved that these proud sons of the sky did live up to the expectations and ranked among the 10 young people or 10 alternates in Aquarius. According to the rules of the Ancestor Hall of Xianxia Mountain, in addition to being able to reach the peak, you can also raise a generation on the top of the landscape genealogy. If you go further, you are lucky enough to become the Yuanying old god, then you will be a higher generation. As for the master-disciple inheritance that originally belonged to the Dao vein, it is calculated separately. So when Kai Jinjian returned to the teacher's gate, he replaced the previous seat in the Golden Core realm at the Patriarch Hall and became the youngest female patriarch in the history of Yunxia Mountain. Kai Zushi in the mountains, Kai Xianxia outside the mountains, it is recognized that 2 steps to heaven. Kai Jinjian withdrew from the ascent platform that year, and was alone in Huaihuang County, and walked outside an empty old school. The imperial examination has a saying of the same year, because a large group of Earth immortals once boarded the ascending platform together, and in a small area, they fell in love with each other, and they had a mountain incense similar to the same year. For example, a pair of young Jianxiu from the True Realm sect, Suiyu and Yanjiu, the pair of seniors and younger brothers, originally had a relationship that could not be achieved by the 2 sides. After that, they had some contacts with Kai Jinjian and Yang Xiaxin. The real names are Wei Gusu and Wei Xianyas, 2 sword repairmen, and they are also the direct disciples of the current lord of Tonghishao Yuguazong and the great sword immortal Wei Ying. That is a big figure who is qualified to participate in the discussion of the Confucian temple. Climbing and practicing together, it's such a slow step and people are more popular than others. Fortunately, Huang Zhongho didn't think about comparing it to Kai Jinjian. Qin Pingon handed over a pot of wui wine. No matter how common the taste is, it's still a drink. Huang Zhongho slapped the pot of wine back, shook his head and smiled. The heart is unpredictable. You dare to drink my wine, I dare not drink yours. Why, your kid is fond of our fairy Kai who came here especially. Don't worry, I'm not a rival in love with you. But to tell the truth, you Daoist, your Longmen realm cultivation base, I guess Kai Jinjian's parents simply looked down on it. Of course, if you can make Kai Jinjian fall in love with you at first sight, it doesn't matter. Kai Jinjian, who entered the Green Mountain Peak, was a typical immortal Taoist couple on the mountain. Her parents were both cultivators, so she was born half a mountain person. It's just that her parents are not high in realm, one is Longmen realm and the other is Sevuing realm. At the ancestral hall, only the father has a seat. Therefore, Kai Jinjian is very awkward every time she discusses matters, because her father's seat is close to the door, and her daughter, now in position next to the mountain lord and master, is already tied with the master. In fact, there are only 2 top-notch things that matter most to Yunxiu Mountain today. The first one, of course, is to remove the suffix of the alternate sect, and go to Dali capital and the accompanying capital. Walk around, among them the King Song Mu, who is still very talkative, will take the time to attend every time, and it can be said that he is not close to Yunxiu Mountain. The second case is about Kai Jinjian's Taoist couple. Not only Kai Jinjian's master, but even the mountain owner went out in person several times and flanked with Kai Jinjian. It's not easy to directly ask unintentional people, so he whispered around and talked about Aquarius Island, who is similar in age and has good aptitude. It's a pity that Kai Jinjian always avoid the important thing every time and just bypass the topic, or just say a word. Marriage can only be reckless and cannot be forced. Qin Pingon put the pot of wine back into his sleeve, laughed blankly and waved his hand. Brother Huang thinks too much. After drinking a pot of Yunxia Mountain's secret brewing Chuankuan wine, Qin Pingon said, "Since I dare to like it, why dare not to say it?" With Brother Huang's cultivating aptitude, his heart is a bond of love. As long as this test is passed, he will become an infant. It's not difficult. The relationship is just a breakthrough. Huang Zhongho laughed angrily. You know what a fart. Fellow Daoist really considers himself an old in the upper 5 realms? Seeing the green shirt guest, he was about to get up and leave. Huang Zhongho said, "Where are you going?" Just a reminder, Yunxia Mountain is not on the other side of the mountain. Unlike my unruly farming Yunfeng, there is no such thing as a mountain gate restriction. It's easy to suffer. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Of course I went to Lvui Peak to talk to Fairy Kai." Huang Zhongho couldn't help being handsome. He was still a guy who didn't dare to say but dared to do it. He waved his hand. Going to the Green Juniper Peak is not a big problem. Kai Jinjian went down the mountain at first, but after returning to the mountain it changed a lot. People have to look at it with admiration. It's definitely not a problem to be a mountain owner, right, Luopa Mountain Master Qin? Qin Pingon stood on the railing with a little toe swept forward, turned his head and smiled. I think Brother Huang, who has been in love, may be more suitable to be the lord of the mountain. Huang Zhongho smiled and put it down. This not-skinned Taoist friend seems good to be a drinker. If there is no nonsense on the wine table, no matter how good the drink is, it will not taste good. It's really going to be too high. Maybe Huang Zhonghe is going to compete with that fellow Taoist to become the master of Qinshan. After all, Huang Zhonghe had long admired the young sword fairy who was born in poverty in the Luopa mountain, and he only hated that he could not meet and drink. Different from Kai Jinjian, Huang Zhonghe was born in the market like that Qinshanju, and he was only a young man who only practiced mountaineering. The only difference was that the latter was romantic and infatuated. So Huang Zhonghe opened another pot of Chuankuan wine, and from his sleeve he drew out a book of landscape travel notes of constant adventures, and brought it to drink in dishes, which tasted great. I will be fortunate to see Chen Pingon in the future, and I must humbly ask him for advice on how to get along with a woman in order to be decent, so that everything is silent. On the Luvju Peak, most of the monks on Xianxia mountain have dispersed, leaving only a few disciples from other peaks, and there are some problems that need to be asked face-to-face with Master Kai. Waiting for the last outer disciple to leave respectfully, Kai Jinjian looked up and found that there was still someone left and smiled and asked, "But you have any doubts to ask?" I was a little bit impressed. It seemed that someone came here halfway to listen to the class. Without a place, I was sitting on the ground over the pillar. It's just a face of life. I have never seen it before. Most of it is a new disciple of a certain peak in Yunxia mountain. As one of the few candidates for the sect on a continent, coupled with the close relationship between Yunxia mountain and the Dai dynasty, there are many people who visit Immortals, apprentices, learn skills and seek Taoism like Crucian Carp who crossed the river so that the ancestral hall complained. It's not over and over, and I'm most afraid that those old Immortal teachers who are somewhat familiar and have a mediocre relationship will force some children to Xianxia, refuse to accept it and will be hurt, but if it is really accepted, Xianxia can never perfuse. It's up. In the end, Kai Jinjian made a suggestion to solve this big problem. Let an old-fashioned monk in the Dragon Gate realm who only knows how to practice cultivating and is not very good at life, to be responsible for welcoming the guests who are sent to and from him, and at the same time in charge of the selection and inclusion of the outer disciples. The man smiled and said, "Fairy Kai, goodbye to the alley. I haven't seen him for many years." Sai Jinjian gripped the Ganoderma lucidum in one hand, awe-inspiring, and squinted his eyes. Who? Wait until she saw a figure that seemed as if the clouds and mist had dispersed to show the true face. Kai Jinjian had a complicated expression, sighed in her heart, held the wood Lingji, bowed and said, "Kai Jinjian, I have seen Lord Chen Shan." Qin Pingon smiled, clasped his fists and replied politely, "I have seen Master Kai Feng." Qin Pingon opened the door and said, "It's very difficult for Xianxia to remove the word candidate in the near future. Dali Court is extremely pragmatic." Kai Jinjian nodded and said, "I have talked about this with several ancestors, but I don't feel optimistic unless..." She paused for a moment and then smiled bitterly. "Unless Yunxia Mountain rushes to settle down before the overall situation is settled, a cultivator of the upper 5 realms suddenly appears. Otherwise, the Zhongtu Confucian Temple will never make an exception for Yunxia Mountain in Aquarius. Of course, it is not an unprecedented precedent. After the Confucian Temple's discussion, Shanshui Mansion reported that the ban was lifted, and 16 new Jin sects appeared one after another. Of course, there was the Luopa mountain of the Qinshanju in front of him. In addition to the 7, all sects were supreme. The 5-realm cultivators sit in town and they seem to be in large numbers, but they can be placed in the entire Haoran Jiuzhou, and there is no one on one continent. Where can the confidence of Yunxia Mountain be one of them? In the previous Battle of Aquarius, Yunxia Mountain had a lot of military accomplishments, but it was far different from the other mountains that were able to break into the sect. Those Zongzita sects that do not have the cultivators of the 5 realms for the time being are not the existence of the officialdom at the foot of the mountain that have been teased as the Machi slanting official. They will never be looked down on because of the lack of a Yupu realm without exception. Those young sect masters who were only in the nascent soul realm for the time being, were all figures who made great achievements in the war. But if Yunxia Mountain took the right path, and got a fate of a Confucian temple similar to the official seal of a yellow paper and vermilion pen, how could this be possible? Kai Jinjian knows herself that she will need at least more than 100 years of hard work to get a little bit. Hope to see the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm. Today's Kai Jinjian has a broad vision and he really doesn't feel that he is a genius for monasticism. My climbing trip is here to discuss a business. I want to buy some Yunzhen stone and Yunxia fragrance from Yunxia mountain. The more the better. Qin Pingon said, I know that supply is in short supply, and almost all of them are monopolized by Dai, so Fairy Kai may need to use some fellow friends. The price is easy to say. Yanggenshi and Yangxiaxiang, as many of these two things I want as much. Yangxiaxian just ask for the price. Intends to place those Yunzhen stones in the dragon caves of several mountains in Kaiyun Peak, and then give them to little Muanshu as her place of cultivation and choose Keifu. Yunxia Mountain is rich in Yunzhen stone, which is a key material used by Taoist standing school to refine Huaidan. This kind of earth treasure is known as flawless and unstained, and is most suitable for refining Huaidan. It is somewhat similar to three kinds of gods. Money contains the aura of pure heaven and earth. One side of the water and soil nourishes one side, so most of the Qi trainers who practice in Yunxia Mountain have a tendency to cleanliness, and their clothes are abnormally clean. As a candidate for the sect, the Yunzhen stone of Yunxia Mountain is the foundation of one's life. It's just that Yunzhen stone has been digging and quarrying too much in the last 30 years, and it is suspected of being sloppy and fishing. Fortunately, there is also an additional benefit, which is the secret Yunxia incense made by Yunxia Mountain. The Dali dynasty extradited the heroic spirits on various battlefields to return home. In addition to the mountain perfume incense, we often need to use the Yunxia incense, whether it is to burn incense to pay homage to the gods of the mountains and waters, or the ancestor-worshipping ancestors of high-ranking officials under the mountain. Yangxiaxiang is a top grade, because Yunxia Mountain can be regarded as one of the most authentic Buddhist sects from Middle-earth if it traces its origins. According to legend, the old Yunxia Immortal who founded the mountain is actually some kind of mysterious background in an ancestral Buddhist temple in Middle-earth. Only after listening to the Dharma and understanding the meditation can the form be successfully refined. Therefore, Yunxia Mountain highly praises that every dependent arising and ending is a crossing of catastrophes. At that time, the Middle-earth Confucian temple was discussing matters, and the two worlds were facing each other. At that time, several eminent monks and great virtues appeared, and their treasures were strict and each had their own visions. Among them was the Quarren monk from Xiankong Temple. Therefore, the secret teaching methods of the Patriarch Hall passed down from generation to generation in Yunxia Mountain are similar to Buddhism. However, although Yunxia Mountain is close to Buddhism and Taoism, it is necessary to discuss the relationship on the mountain, because the relationship between Yanggenshi and Taoist temples is more fragrant. Kai Jinjian was a little embarrassed for a while and it was not difficult to get some together, but as Qin Pingon said, she really needed her to piece together, not to mention that she didn't want to have a good relationship with Luopashan. The problem is that Luopashan's strong background is how it is possible. Just for the sake of dozens of caddies of Yunzhen stone and more than 100 barrels of incense, can a mountain owner who is already a young sword immortal come to Yunxia Mountain to ask for it? Furthermore, after that year's list appeared, Kai Jinjian saw the Qin 11 of the Great Wall of Sword Qi surrounded by clouds and mist. Kai Jinjian had almost no doubt, it must be Qin Pingon in Mud Bottle Alley. So Qin Pingon has a more hidden identity, the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Kai Jinjian had to bite the bullet and report 2 numbers. Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. Yes, it's already beyond expectation. Kai Jinjian was surprised but still relieved. Qin Pingon suddenly thought silently. Kai Jinjian was shocked at first and then knew it instantly. She hurriedly avoided the surprise and never dared to accept the gift. She just helped with that little thing back then and she was just a small effort to pass the letter on her behalf. Therefore, there are still a lot of ancestors in the mountaintop who speculate that you, Kai Jinjian, and the Great Wall of Jianqi, are there any unspeakable incense feelings? After Qin Pingon left, Kai Jinjian hesitated, but Yufeng went to Zhenjianfeng, which was not very frequent. In the past, the main reason was to prevent the ancestors of Shanmen from misunderstanding what she had with Huang Zhongho. Huang Zhongho saw Kai Jinjian from a distance. He was obviously a little surprised. He quickly put away the mountain and water travel notes, shook his hip flask and said with a smile, Kai Feng is a rare visitor. Kai Jinjian asked in his heart, I heard someone say that you plan to formally confess to her? The woman Huang Zhongho likes, named Wu Yuani, is a close disciple of the previous mountain lord, so she has a high seniority. Even Huang Zhongho, who is the lord of the peak, has to call her uncle when he sees her. Huang Zhongho was stunned. What? Cai Jinjian smiled knowingly and said softly, "What's so embarrassing about this? It's been so embarrassing for so many years. Brother Huang should have been so refreshing. It's a good thing. Jin Jian here wishes Brother Huang through the relationship." Huang Zhongho flushed, slapped the railing vigorously and said angrily, "It's the who claims to be Qin Pingon talking nonsense on your side? Are you a fool? Dare you believe this kind of bastard?" Cai Jinjian said cautiously. Before he left, he said that senior brother Huang had a thin face and met him at Gung Yunfeng. He uttered the truth after drinking, but he still didn't dare to speak by himself, so he hoped that I would help Fei Jian to spread the word to the ancestral mountain. Let's meet with Uncle Wu Yuani. Fei Jian is probably all ready. Huang Zhongho was dull and speechless. He was silent for a long time. He gritted his teeth and said, "Let's talk about who the outsider is. I'll hack him to death." Cai Jinjian smiled and said, "Can't you be who you claim to be?" Fenglei Garden. Owner of the garden, Huang He, after inquiring the sword in Xingyang Mountain, wandered away with the sword alone and left Aquarius Island. First go to the site of the Great Wall of Jianqi and then go to the barren world that he said is, the sky is high and the earth is wide and the best for swords. If it weren't for Masterly Tuan Jingbing's dissolution, Big Brother Huang he would have to take care of everything. Otherwise he would have gone to Jianqi Great Wall long ago with his temperament and temper. On the railing of the high-rise building, Lu Baqiao spread his hands and walked here. An originally handsome man, shabby Hulila scum. Today is another day without incident and Lu Baqiao is really boring. The brother Huang he made Lu Baqiao sincerely respect, fear, feel ashamed and feel guilty at the same time. The last time Lu Baqiao was the owner of Fenglei Garden in his life was that before he went to Daolong's Hu, brother Huang he planned to remove his identity as the owner. At that time, the brother had already done a good job and died on the battlefield in Aquarius Island. Ready. Following the ascension platform to fly ascend, that time, the one who benefited most was Su Hun, the Qingfeng city wearing a scorpion armor. Although it was only a breakthrough, it was Yupu who had become a member of Yuanying. But the most regrettable thing is to be with Su Hun climb to the top of the Sea of Clouds. You can see the Lu Ba Bridge at the gate. In fact, he almost had the opportunity to break through the two realms in a row and complete a feat. But Lu Baqiao had already taken a big step and he took a small step back for some reason. Lu Baqiao hugged the back of his head with both hands and couldn't help sighing. After senior brother traveled far away in the wild, Fenglei Garden only had him as a cultivator of nascent soul stage. Lu Baqiao is not a piece of material that can take care of affairs. All the general affairs are entrusted to those junior brothers and nephews. Song Daoguang, Zaixiang, Xing Yoheng and Nangong Xingyan, these four sword repairmen, are very young, 2 golden pills, less than 100 years old. A dragon gate, a view of the sea, naturally younger. Not surprisingly, Fenglei Garden's next master selection will be chosen from these 4 young people. As for Lu Baqiao, who was already a sword repairer in the Yuaning realm, he was both unintentional and powerless. Lu Baqiao sometimes he can't wait to give his realm to the boy Xing Yoheng. As long as he can, Lu Baqiao will never frown. Of course, don't look at the guy Xing Yoheng who is usually scornful. In fact, just like the brother, he is very arrogant and will not accept it. As for the old antiques in Fenglei Garden who have a strong temper and speak loudly, they have no objection to them, they just concentrate on practicing swords. Fight for power. Since the establishment of Fenglei Garden, there has been no such saying. Occasionally the old people met Lu Baqiao and they were so unpretentious and inattentive that they would hurt Li Tuanjing, the owner of the garden. They could not beat Lu Baqiao or could not catch up with Lu Baqiao's sword, otherwise they could put the sole of the shoe on Lu Xianying's face. Anyway, these elders always look for Lu Baqiao, who is an unobtrusive, every time they have trouble practicing their swords. Since it is an unobtrusive, it would be a waste not to go to the door to curse a few words. As one of the 10 young people in Aquarius, but Lu Baqiao's ranking has been declining. First he was surpassed by Xia Ling of Longquan Jianzong, and then he was squeezed by Ma Kuxuan's uncle and military clerk Yu Shiwu. Behind. Baqiao, I call you Uncle Lu, can you do it? 10 young people, there are only 10 people, not 100. Uncle's words are so bad I can still fall to 10 candidates. The old man said earnestly and earnestly, can you serve snacks when practicing swords? Isn't it just a Yuaning Xing Yupu? What a big deal, let the uncle, I am Yuaning. Lu Baqiao immediately slapped the uncle in the Golden Core realm. What Yuaning is left, the uncle is aggrieved in Yupu realm. Little bastard, stretch out your face quickly, uncle's hands are itchy. Lu Baqiao has promised his seniors to be among the 5 realms within 100 years. If the senior cannot return from the wild world, Lu Baqiao will have to fight for a fairyland, and if it is done, even if he has a decent confession to Fenglei Garden. Lu Baqiao took a deep breath, turned his head and looked into the distance. Su Jia regained his status as a descendant of Xingyang Mountain Zhu Shitang. I heard that she seems to stay in Xiagushan, but she will also go to Jiyu Peak. After practicing swordsmanship, Lu Baqiao would sneak down the mountain from time to time to take a trip to the bookstore in Xiaoguo Junqing, a tributary of the old Zhuang dynasty. The bookseller was an ordinary young woman who was at that time. His name is He Jia. After she left, Lu Baqiao bought the shop, leaving everything intact. Even if you just look at the closed shop every time and step into it without opening the door, Lu Baqiao will feel relieved. As a swordsman, the practice of swordsmanship seemed to be to prevent the master from being disappointed before, and then to prevent the senior from looking down too much. But now it is for Fenglei Garden. What's next? Lu Baqiao don't know. Seems that she only likes that woman. In this matter she will die from one thing. A warm voice sounded above Lu Baqiao. Hey Lu Dajiangxian, who do you miss? Lu Baqiao leaned forward, raised his head and saw a man in a green shirt sitting on the edge of the roof, with a familiar and unfamiliar smiling face, which was quite awkward. Yeah, isn't this Qin Dajiangxian? I'm lucky enough to meet. Lu Baqiao immediately reached out his arm and waved his hand. Let's relax, our Fenglei Garden swordsman has a bad temper. Outsiders trespassing here without permission, be careful to be beaten by chaotic swords. There is nothing to disagree with Chen Pingon. Furthermore, Fenglei Garden does not have any red tape in its hospitality. Anyway, there are not many customers throughout the year because Fenglei Garden swordsman has not many friends, but there are so many people who look down on it. Chen Pingon jumped slightly from the roof, stepped onto the railing, and threw a pot of wine to Lu Baqiao, and the two sat on the railing together. Lu Baqiao raised his head and took a sip of wine, raised his sleeves and wiped the corners of his mouth and smiled. In fact, it hasn't been a few years since the last time. 20 or 30 years on the mountain is nothing. How do you feel that we haven't seen each other for a long time? Chen Pingon smiled and joked. I almost didn't recognize you. Why, now the fairies in Aquarius all like this man with Luodo appearance. Lu Baqiao said with a hippie smile. The autumn wind blows Lu Lang's waist thin, and it is difficult to raise autumn fat. Lu Baqiao remembered something, lowered his voice and said, you really have to be careful. We have a young girl named Nangong Xingyan. She looks pretty, but she has a violent temper. The girl's eyes were shining, and now the mantra every day is the phrase, there is such a handsome man in the world? Qin Jianxian asked you if you are afraid? Qin Pingon didn't care about this at all and said, your brother seems to have gone to the wild world. Now you are at the Risheng Ferry and you are very close to Wei Ying of Yuguizhong. I heard that the Yellow River was at the site of the Jianqi Great Wall. I just stopped for a while, chatted with the fellow swordsman Wei and Jin, and quickly went to the sunken side. But when the Yellow River arrived at the ferry, he would directly clarify the matter with a few garrison monks. He would take out the sword alone as a casual cultivator. However, it seemed to have changed his mind afterwards, temporarily serving as a bearer monk with a large iron cavalry. On the side of Rependant, in addition to Su Zi and Lu Qi, there are also Dali Song Chongjing and Yuguizhong Weiying. Qin Pingon has always believed that whether it is Li Tuanjing or the Yellow River, if this pair of masters and disciples were born in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, they would definitely achieve high kendo achievements. Maybe it can stand shoulder to shoulder with great sword immortals like Mi Hu and Yu Qing. Lu Baqiao asked curiously, how did you know that my senior brother was at the ferry crossing in Japan, and even knew that he had a relationship with Wei Ying? Your kid opened his eyes? Qin Pingon smiled and said, you can guess it. A wind and thunder garden, there is no mirror flower water moon of its own, no landscape mansion report, no unnecessary human relations, and foreign trade and trade are extremely limited. In the eyes of outsiders, Fenglei Garden is an isolated, boring practice. In addition to swordsmanship is still practiced. Dozens of ancestors from the Patriarch Hall, plus unregistered outer disciples, and some stewards and maidservants who help with secular affairs, but more than 200 people. According to the ancestors of Fenglei Garden, this is a place where kendo is taught, not a place to raise idlers. Other mountain tops, Every time a Qi practitioner breaks the boundary, the Patriarch Hall will generally reward a sum of money from the gods. There is no such saying in Fenglei Garden. You can follow Fenglei Garden to advance the gods' money for all you need for sword cultivation in the lower 5 realms, and you can use it to advance the money. After entering the middle 5 realms, you need to repay the money. Go down the mountain to practice. Of course, if you are in the sword vein, the elders of the sect, if he was willing to help pay for the money, Fenglei Garden didn't stop him either. Several mountain dynasties near Fenglei Garden, in addition to the sword fairy embryos sent from Fenglei Garden, there were also named offerings and the title of Keqing who took the initiative to send them to the door. It was a lot of money. Even after Li Tuanjing died that year, no dynasty or vassal country under the mountain dared to take away the titles of sword repair without authorization and deduct the money from the gods. Is really the kind of awe for Fenglei Garden Xianxia which has penetrated into the bones. Fenglei Garden sword repair, regardless of men and women apart from the level of realm, it is also like a temperament carved out of a mold. The sword is straightforward, he is clear about his grievances and he acts vigorously and resolutely. Once there was a middle 5 swordsman who had his arms cut off during his experience and deliberately left his mouth alive. The owner of the garden, Li Tuanjing, asked clearly what had happened, and went down the mountain alone with a sword to go to the big mountain of the old Zhuing dynasty. Without saying a word, he just cut off the arms of all the 12 people from the other party's Patriarch Hall. The old Zhuing dynasty, once known as the sword repairer like a cloud and crowning a continent, was surprised that no sword repairer was willing to speak out. You should know that Li Tuanjing also made a special trip to the outside of Zhuingjing. He stayed at a ferry crossing over there for 3 full days, and was here deliberately waiting for someone to ask the sword. Lu Baqiao asked, "How did you think of coming to our Fenglei Garden? How long will you stay?" Qin Pingon said, "Leave right away." Lu Baqiao joked, "I'm really afraid of a little girl?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "You remember to go to Luopa Mountain when you have time. I have to take a trip to Old Dragon City." Lu Baqiao noticed something strange and nodded, not keeping Qin Ping in. The ruins of the Old Dragon City, the magnificent inner and outer cities of the past are being rebuilt, and the construction is in full swing. It's just the Bailey Long Street under the name of Sun Jiashu. The dragon platform, the sea of clouds in the sky, the dusty medicine shop in the alleys, and the Shirley Huapu that me Daijiangxian mist are naturally gone. In the vast night of the world, the daytime of the wild world. Qin Pingon is standing on the shore of the South China Sea at this moment, seeming to close his eyes and rest up his mind, but in fact he is reading a picture of time and time, as if he saw the minefield with his own eyes. After opening his eyes, Qin Pingon immediately returned to the north, choosing his hometown as a foothold, standing on the top of the steps in the long riding alley with both hands and sleeves. Just here in my hometown, there was a heavy rain that fell from the sky and landed on the earth. The Battle of Tuyue Mountain has come to an end, and the sword slashes a pinnacle of the Ascension realm. Qin Pingon walked down the steps slowly. Countless raindrops fell on the ground as if following a blue shirt pouring down the steps. Qin Pingon reached out to touch his eyebrows, walked halfway, suddenly stopped, first glanced at the Yang family medicine shop, and then turned to look towards Luopa Mountain. Even in the heavy rain, the right protector of Luopa Mountain still performed his duty, looking at the gate alone at the foot of the mountain. The millet grains seemed a bit boring and they shook their heads there as if talking to themselves or trembling with someone with a golden pole in one hand and a trekking pole in the other, pointing at the rain screen saying that you can't see it anymore. Well, in fact my temper is bad, or bad, petty temper so fierce. Believe it or not, a pole will fall to the ground and a bamboo pole will be beaten into a pig's head. That's it. Let's forget it this time. Let's not take it as an example. To make a discussion, both of us have to have a long memory and a little bit more. Otherwise it will always cause trouble, which is not appropriate. Besides, we are all walking in the rivers and lakes. We must be friendly. It is not good to fight and kill. Is it this reason? Well, since you don't deny it, just assume you understand. The little girl in black stopped talking suddenly, wrinkled a small face and 2 sparse eyebrows, motionless. Could it be that the enemy came to the door? Even the rain stopped? It seems that the other party's Taoism is very high. What should I do? Qin Pingon smiled and asked, "Why? So fierce?" Xiao Mili suddenly raised her head and laughed. Turned out to be a good mountain lord. Qin Pingon rubbed the head of the millet grains and asked softly, "Tell me, why is it troublesome?" The millet grain carried a golden pole on his shoulder, took the trekking pole and poked the ground, grinned. "What the hell, I am composing a wonderful story about the rivers and lakes." Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at a river beyond Hongzhou town. Xiaomi Li quickly stretched out his hand and pulled the sleeve of the good man Shanzhu and said, "Don't you eat melon seeds?" Qin Pingon gave a hum and stretched out her hand. The millet grains immediately opened the messenger cotton bag and took out a large handful with both hands. When the master of the good man took the melon seeds, she rushed away and brought in 2 bamboo chairs, one large and one large. Small, sitting side by side eating sunflower seeds together. Xiaomi Li scratched his face and asked, "Good man Mountain Lord, when will you go home?" Qin Pingon smiled and replied, "He'll be back soon, waiting for me to finish engraving a word on the city's head." Sword of Coming Chapter 873. Qin Pingon stood on the spider silk that bridged the 2 rounds of bright moon, took a step back and fell straight, chasing after the ancient great demon who took the initiative to evacuate the battlefield. At the same time he stretched out his hand and tugged, and put the spider silk that the master was too late to take away and put it in his sleeve. Anyway, there was Zhou Xian and there was no future trouble. Qin Pingon glanced at the gate. Across the gate there was the Qingming world. There was a lot of Dao Qi in the weather, and it seemed that a large number of mountain Taoists gathered one after another. Bai Zhe and Li Xing, a pair of friends who had fought side by side and were extremely close friends for thousands of years, turned out to be merciless when they waited for each to take action after thousands of years. For the bright moon that was about to move out of the wild world, one blocked the 4. Xianxia dragged on for a month. One of them blocked Bai Zhe's obstruction, and the 2 sides fought into chaos from time to time. Both parties were already 14th realm great monks 10,000 years ago, and because of the great path in their hearts, each took the initiative to abandon the 15th realm. A portrait in white clothes with vast ancient meanings and a portrait in Confucian shirts with great righteousness. Every warp and weft thread on the Saint Confucian shirt is a rule in the world. Looking at it carefully, the Bai Zhe Fa Xiang was made up of countless real names of monster races. Therefore, every time the 2 sides collapsed, it was a veritable upside-down great dispute. With great difficulty, Lu Qin found a fleeting opportunity, tweaked a page of Taoism from his sleeve, read a word, and then threw a purple lingering talisman of his own creation, and went through the gate connecting the 2 worlds. By Yujing, give good news to the second senior brother, and quickly lead the brother by Yujing to pick up the bright moon, and he will be relieved early and then immediately close the door. Otherwise Bai Zhe will be ruthless and will directly change the battlefield to the Qingming world and punch again. The consequences of breaking the bright moon would be disastrous. With Bai Zhe's realm of cultivation, even in the Qingming world, even if the senior brother Yudo is wearing a robes and a handheld fairy sword, he is destined to be unable to keep it. Once the saint of worship has reached the Qingming world, the great power is so heavy that it is unimaginable. Even more exaggerated than the most sacred master going to the Qingming world. Moreover, Lu Qin knows the temper of the brother best and he is absolutely unwilling to join hands with the enemy, especially Bai Zhe's way of harmonization which is not seriously injured. No different as long as Bai Zhe returns to the wild world with Bai Zhe's real body toughness, coupled with Bai Zhe's deep understanding of the world's many Taoisms, I believe he will soon regain his combat power. After all, not everyone can give pointers to the Fei water method. The skinny old man who woke up from his long sleep in the depths of the ruins of the Moon Palace had turned into the appearance of a middle-aged man with just a few breaths during the fall, and he was still in a state of mystery similar to Taoism's return to innocence, without accident. I believe it will soon be transformed into a young posture, and this change is not dictated by blindness, it is an unstoppable manifestation of the road. This ascendant peak great demon straightened a line and fell to the ground. Never wanted to be followed by the guy wearing the lotus crown. The big demon held a long sword wrapped around his back. His heartstrings moved slightly, but quickly weighed the pros and cons, or gave up the urge to hand the sword to kill people. The distance between the 2 sides was less than 10 feet, and the 2 sword auras and rainbow lights slammed into the wild land together. The movement was so loud that it vibrated like thunder. The big demon asked in a wild old saying, "Don't help that little master?" Unexpectedly, the human monk smiled in an extremely skilled savage old saying, "You didn't help Mr. Bai either?" Is the peak demon who looks like a young man slightly surprised? Is it because I missed you, you are not a human being? A young Terran monk, who would eat and hold on and go to delve into the ancient sayings of the wild. Furthermore, there is indeed a trace of vague familiarity in this monk. Seeing the man smiling and not talking, the ancient monster asked, "What will you do with me?" The person is sincere. See if you can take advantage of your unstable realm and haven't really returned to the top. Find a chance to kill you. One net hangs the void, tens of billions of murderous. The most suitable battlefields are for those who occupy the most favorable terrain. As long as you create a nest in the deep underground, you only need to stop the bugs from flying. For those who throw themselves into the net, the monks of the lower 5 realms, and the soldiers and horses of the mountain similar to the big Li cavalry. In terms of this ascending realm great demon is simply the most terrifying formation master. What's more, this ancient monster is still a pinnacle swordsman who carries a certain or even several ancient swordsmanship. The big demon laughed blithely. Today's young monks, one by one, are so high in realm, have such a bad temper and speak so directly. Compared with the previous ones, the sword repairman only talks about age and is even more weird. The mountain and river scene of the small world, calculated by the 1-year-old age, is obviously less than 50 years old. But it can be shaped according to the long river of time. Calculated by a certain number of years, the sword repair in front of him is still not old, but at any rate it is about 300 years old, and only occasionally reveals 4 or 5,000 years old. Looking at the young sword repairman with both hands and sleeves, the big demon sneered and said, "Don't cheat me here. If you are really capable, you are 50% sure, you will have a sword long ago." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Then try it." The big demon didn't have a reason to think of his Taoist couple, that little lady. It was really ruthless to have a sword. "Don't try it. No need." The real reason was that the servant glanced at the ground intentionally or unintentionally, as if he had seen his mind. Once his feet touched the ground, he would form a formation of heaven and earth, the sky and the ground, and there were many nets. In your own world, call out a few more helpers and fight a 14th level monk. Even if the chance of winning is not great, you have to peel off the other side's skin, such as telling Zhou Xian. Fuck, why is Zhou Xian gone? Has Howren already hit Zhou Mountain? Looking around and seeing the formation of the human race, it didn't look like it at all. This big demon instantly felt cold and quickly weighed the pros and cons. It was better to get back to the 6-hole goblin and goblin under his command in the past years. After eating and drinking, he returned to the peak and then he asked the sword to be more secure. "I just don't know if those disciples and grandchildren will spread their branches and leaves in the wild world after 10,000 years. Why do you have so many accidents after being awakened by Zhe this time? Is it over?" This big demon looked rather helpless. He became more determined and had to stubbornly and temper his temper. It is better to do more than to do less, so he said straightforwardly, "Let's talk about it. How can you go on both sides?" Faces nothing. In the past, the spells fell like rain on the earth, and on the earth, regardless of the demon race, only those who had a good chance were able to climb the mountain and practice. In fact, compared with Baze and the newly risen group of monster monks, it is considered a junior in cultivation and has a mediocre aptitude because it is a matter of sword practice. It is with a supreme existence squatting on the ground and kowtowing. Lu Xun noticed the change in Qin Pingan's mood and had to remind him, "Don't really fight, the Saint of Rights is going to suffer a lot from fighting with Zhe here." Qin Pingangsen said, "There are counts." Lu Xun breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I think the sword in your hand is not bad." The essence of the moonlight from the previous round of Haotsai was condensed into a long sword by this pinnacle great demon using a secret method. After the big demon walked around holding the sword's hand, he shook the sword flower and the moonlight overflowed. "Said it earlier, I will send you." Qin Pingan put out a hand from his sleeve, not to pick up the sword, but to hold the knight you behind in his hand. The demon nodded, kind of interesting. After, the double convenience is to make a sword with all your strength and cut a sword against each other. Each body retreated 10 miles. The long sword in the hands of the big demon instantly shattered, turning into a large cloud of rich moonlight, the moonlight as thick as mercury. The big demon's figure dissipated, and a huge pit suddenly appeared on the ground. The demon young sword repairman who returned to the world from the ruins of the moon slightly bent his knees, straightened his waist, and looked up at the human race who had not pursued him. Xianxia, it seemed that he had to remember that face well. Qin Ping and waved his sleeves and took those moonlights into his bag. The sword light flashed and went to the site of the Great Wall of Jianqi. When Qin Pingon stepped on the top of the city, Lu Qin leaned back and lay in the Lotus Dojo. The third master of Bai Yujing was relieved, and Pan Dao finally didn't have to worry about it. It is more than just living like years. It is almost 1,000 years of things done in one day. He Shou fell from the sky, still observing the rules hanging outside the city, his feet staying on the ground. The old master carefully took out the ancient soldier, only dared to hold it but didn't dare to hold it at all. Narrow sword, He Shou gently pushed the young hidden official who returned to the head of the city. This sword is the weapon left by the old sword Immortal after slaying the executor. With a single sword, the old sword Immortal let I will transfer this knife to you, which is regarded as a wedding gift for you and Ning Jianxian. Lu Qin craned his neck in the Lotus Dojo inside the crown, staring wide-eyed and carefully examined the legendary weapon. This is a well-deserved spiritual soldier, compared to the spiritual fairy soldiers of later generations. It's even higher, no need for refining. As long as you can make this type of weapon recognize the master, you can get one or even several ancient magical powers. He Shou reminded, hidden officials must be careful. This blade is extremely difficult to control. The narrow sword Zhang Kan exchanged from the Huawei heavenly demon was once the object of execution in the dragon slashing platform. Across the wall of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the two blades are adjacent to each other, and there is a difference between monarchs and ministers. The ancient high-ranking god, the executioner, once said at the time of this world that those who are lucky enough to see this blade are unfortunate. Qin Pingon nodded, still reaching out to hold the handle of the sheathless long knife without hesitation. There was nothing strange but very docile. He Shou, the old master, was quite ashamed. Qin Qing had previously held this god's blade in his hand. It was not a bit awkward, that's all. Unexpectedly, the young hermit took it, and it was still so handy. It is necessary to know that this period of time to temporarily take charge of this weapon is just to suppress the many anomalies caused by that pure divinity, which makes He Shou quite difficult. Lu Xun sighed in his heart. Not only because Qin Pingon is a certain one, but also because the young hermit is a martial artist of the end, and a mysterious master. The entire Qingming world, working hard to collect and search around, not only fished from the broken secrets in the long river of time, but even the great monks traveled far beyond the sky, using the stars as the ferry, moving the stars for battle, and a total of only 18 relics of the gods. There are only 2 of them which can be equal to this item in Lu Chen's eyes. One is in the Baiyujing Biyun building, which has been sealed for thousands of years. It is a pair of armor. According to legend, it is one of the 3 fakes of the armor on the armored person. And these 3 fakes have derived from the 3 strategists Jiuan, Jingwujia, Jinwujia, and Godman Menlujia, cast by later generations of military strategists. At that time, Ganlujia cast 8 ancestors' pioneering works in one go. The broken and restricted Xia was picked up by Qin Pingon from Lingzi's High. The rest were Buddha Kingdom, Bud, Mountain Ghost, Narcissus, Xiaoguang, Tsai, and Sea of Clouds, but most of them were destroyed. Back then, Lu Qin originally planned to steal the armor from the Biyun Tower and give it to the junior apprentice, but he failed and was blocked by the host, and then he filed a grievance with senior apprentice Yudo. Yudo didn't feel distressed about this precious treasure, but thought that the little junior brother, now his realm was too low, he couldn't control this precious treasure at all for the time being. At least he had to be a fairy to offset that divine aftertaste. Another magic weapon, which ran outside Bai Yujing, was in the hands of the wives and aunts of the 14th realms who had a bad temper, which enabled the female crown to acquire a kind of magical power of the caster, enabling her to rely solely on her own power. Forged half-celestial soldiers, even fairy soldiers. The other 16 divine weapons were not owned by the 12 high-ranking gods, and their ranks were about to be inferior. One of them was the narrow sword of Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuang Jiang. The result was tossed all the way. The Great Wall of Jianqi was again obtained by Qin Pingon. And this kind of magic weapon has another weirdness. It will be very smooth when used by a pure martial artist, and there are almost no sequelae. On the other hand, if a Qi practitioner holds the treasure in his hand, he must be careful, even if he is successfully refined by the cultivator. It is still easy to rebel. Qingming world, there have been more than a dozen such tragedies in history. The monk's Taoism is infiltrated, imperceptibly, and he will change his temperament without knowing it. The most tragic time was an ascendant monk who seemed to be in a madness. He almost broke the barrier between the heavens and the heavens with the help of magical weapons in his hand, and stabbed him. After breaking the sky, Grand Master Bai Yujing made the shot himself to fill the hole in the sky, and stopped the younger brother Yudo, who was traveling far away with a sword and planned to chop off the head of the monk, and personally turned that man into a big hole. The wrong monk returned to Bai Yujing, followed him in cultivating for hundreds of years, and finally returned to normal Taoism, and even served as the lord of Bai Yujing. And this Bai Yujing Taoist official is the former city lord of Xianxia city, and also the Taoist saint who sits on the canopy of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Therefore Bai Yujing will always pay attention to the whereabouts of every magic weapon and every time it appears. Qin Pingon suddenly asked in his heart. The nectar armor that was unsold by hanging mountainlings is high back then was deliberately let me pick it up? Whose handwriting Dao's second child? It's not like it, is it Zhou Zi? Lu Shinduan sat in the dojo, pinched the tactics with one hand, and put on a silent expression. Qin Pingon immediately understood that it was this guy who had eaten all day and had nothing to do. Take out the narrow knife and cut it out, add the execution, and Qin Pingon stacks the two narrow knives around his waist. Crouched down, Qin Pingon gently took out the two jugs of ashes, one in each hand hanging outside the city head. The jug was against the wall and with a light knock, both jugs were broken and drifted away in the wind. Returned home. After a long silence, Qin Pingon stood up and took the initiative to smile with he show. Master, he just land on the city's head. The specific route for this trip to the barren hinterland, we need to report to the Confucian temple on the side of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Record files. He show smiled and nodded. Thanks to the understanding of Wensheng's close disciple. Otherwise he really couldn't open his mouth. As a sage who sits here, he asked the 5 sword repairmen about matters. Of course it was reasonable but not necessarily sensible. But since Qin Pinyin is willing to take the initiative to mention it as a young hidden official, there is no problem. He show immediately called a Confucian gentleman, and the two fell on the top of the city together. The latter thanked the young hermit. Qin Pingon opened the door and said, on our trip, we went to Baihua City in the Wild World, the ancient battlefield site named Longhong, Diwa Qingshan. Yunwen Dynasty Jade City, Chunjian Mountain, Xianshan City. Jiuquan Sect. Yiluo, Tuyueshan. There are 9 places in total. Qin Pingon raised his head. If you add Mingyu's Houtsai, there will be 10 places. The Confucian gentleman had already taken out the pen, ink and paper and recorded the addresses one by one in the book. The more he listened, the more shocked he became. Except for the relatively unfamiliar Chunjian Mountain, the gentleman couldn't be more familiar with the other locations. Especially the fairy hairpin city dragging down the river Tuyue Mountain. This gentleman was shocked and even more absurd. If the person in front of him was the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi, he couldn't help but say something. Questioning the true and false is not because he doesn't want to believe it, but it's too unbelievable, it makes people incredible. Baihua City, a barren sect named Head Mountain Gate. The sect was destroyed except for the immortal realm suzerain who barely escaped from birth at the price of damaging the Ancient. The other 5 realm palm disciplines and the earth immortal monster cultivator are all dead. The ancient battlefield of Long Hong after was swept away by sword light. However, Qin Pingon did not forget to mention that the Confucian temple still needs to ask Qi Tingji and the others for the specific combat achievements of the 2 places. Old master, he sat cross-legged, squinted his beard and smiled happily. Hidden officials Qin Pingon, Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji, criminal officials Haosu. When these 5 swordsmen sword repairers from the Great Wall of Sword Qi traveled together, they were so long and unstoppable. After the young hermit set about breaking the Xiandan city, which is known as the highest city in the world, into 2 pieces and smashing the patriarch hall. Hearing this, he laughed. The gentleman who was in charge of picking up the pen was so stunned that he didn't dare to write the pen for a while and had to ask, Hidden officer, the fairy hairpin city is beaten in 2? Can I ask a digression how? Interrupted. Qin Pingon sat cross-legged, originally clenching his fists, gently resting on his knees, smiled and raised his hands at this moment. The Confucian gentleman understood. The current city lord of Feishing City, the old monk Xuanpu, has been killed. Qin Pingon said, beheaded by criminal officer Haosu. This ascending realm great demon is really an ancient mysterious snake, and even a demon pill can be preserved. Generally, this level of catch and fight can be achieved. Only when the strength of the two sides is very different, one side will kill it instantly, such as the flying sword. According to the agreement, Qin Pingon gave the criminal Haosu to the criminal officer, and he kept it in his opponent's name to help Haosu atone for his merits and fulfill the agreement with the Chinese Temple of Confucius. For Qin Pingon, it is a good thing for Haosu to go to the Qingming world to bear the title of the last criminal officer. Yan Ming and Dong Huafu, who are the Yuanyu sword repairmen, are temporarily not high in realm, especially before entering the 5 realms. Need to have a senior protector from his family. Also, this person is the most nostalgic. Otherwise he would not be obsessed with this spiritual and blessed land in his hometown, as if he was practicing swords in this life just for revenge. Qin Pingon added, the criminal officer will hand over the real body of Xuanpu together with the demon pill to the Confucian temple, and the Confucian temple will examine the matter. He said in amazement, what a criminal officer! If you don't sound, you have already made a blockbuster and I have made a great battle for me. If there is a chance, the old man will also sincerely apologize to Haosu. I learned about this person earlier. Cut down Nan Guangzheo's head. It's actually nothing. It's just a grievance. The old man just felt that a sword-powered Great Wall criminal officer could not make a half-sword in that battle. He was not even as good as an old deaf child from a demon clan. It was only after I returned to Howren that I began to fight fiercely. I really can't afford the title of criminal officer. So at that time I made a suggestion with Li Xing to throw this band hero into the Forest of Merit, and happened to have a companion with Lu Cha. The one who is in charge of fishing and the other who makes the fire and cooks the rice. Isn't it better than a fairy tale couple? Now it seems that the old man misunderstood Haosu. Qin Pingon glanced at the bright moon that was getting closer and closer to the gate and said, Haosu may not personally give out the true body of Xuanpu, it may be handed over by Sect Master Qi, and I hope that the Confucian temple will be accommodating. He nodded and said, these are all trivial things. I can agree to it here. Qin Pingon nodded slightly and then continued, I'm in Xianxia City and I have joined hands with the head teacher of Baiyu Jinglu to do another thing, which is to get the blessed land in the bag. Afterwards, head teacher Lu, before returning to Qingming, he will hand over the Yaoguang blessed land to the Confucian temple in exchange for 3 chances to return to Howren in the future. In addition, Qin Pingon only briefly talked about the process, which is convenient for the Confucian temple to find opportunities to verify. Was named Yaoguang Fudi by Gui Lingxiang, the founder of Xiandan City. In fact, it is the root of Xiandan City's reputation as the arsenal of the world by the wilds. Without this first-class blessed land, the future fairy hair city would be tantamount to completely losing the source of weapon casting. Master Lu suddenly no longer felt sorry for those invaluable Sanshan talisman, moon talisman and sword talisman. Is all small money. A cultivator who claims to be poor and poor every day, cares about what a small amount of heaven and earth treasure gods do. He coughed, stretched out a hand, patted the arm of the gentleman's pen, patted it gently and said with earnestness, the hermit and Lu Zhangjiao, this time sincerely cooperated and won the Yaoguang Fudi. One thing, the primary and secondary point of credit still need to be realistic and write the first one. The gentleman immediately understood his mind. His brilliant pen gave birth to flowers, and his writing was intertwined and drip-proof. Lu Xun didn't care about this, but he didn't understand it. According to Bai Yujing's intelligence, this old master, he was a notorious and unreasonable old man, so he hadn't directly spoken to a corrupt scholar. Regarding the Battle of Drago River, Qin Pingon was very brief, only talking about a tug-of-war, and he forcibly intercepted 30% of the water transport from the hands of the old throne Fei Fei. Qin Pingon asked, does Mr. He drink? He smiled and asked, don't the hidden official know about this? Qin Pingon was stunned, a little confused. I know what this kind of thing is doing. He laughed and stretched out his hand. I haven't been drinking for many years, but today I can make an exception. This old master wine can drink, but he really doesn't like it. It belongs to the wine that even old talents could not persuade. What really made he feel comfortable was that the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi did not understand the so-called accompany saints who ate cold pig's head. He did not understand the slightest trivial matter. This means that the relationship with the Confucian temple is so delicate that people do not think that he is one of the Confucian scholars. The attitude towards the Confucian temple, especially the sub-sage family, is not close, even if it is not close. As for the resentment. Otherwise, Qin Pingon would have been able to understand the details of the Confucian Temple Academy and the sages of the sages and elders in his work style during his tenure as a young hermit. Qin Pingon laughed and handed a pot of wine to the old master, who was quite old. It was the Xianxia wine from his own wine shop. Lu Xian asked heartily, "Where is that senior?" On the way to the moon with amulet on both sides. It seemed that the long sword that came from outside the sky disappeared, and even Lu Xian was missing. Qin Pingon gave an answer that was not an answer with his heartfelt voice. "I didn't say it before. That feeling of mine has been cut off by senior brother Cui." Lu Xian asked again, "The other, where are you in Aquarius?" Qin Pingon said, "I'm already at home. I just arrived in Qilong Alley. While the realm is still there, I will confirm whether Master Lu has left behind Shiro." Lu Xian complained, "Pan Dao, this person has always been harmless. Besides, as for your student, how clever the method is in the matter of spirits, would you not be clear?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You must have a defensive heart. There are 2 shops in Qilong Alley. One is called Chao Tu and the other is called New Year's Eve. Chao Tu is a wild vegetable that can be seen everywhere in Qin Pingan's hometown. It is also known as golden cauliflower. According to ancient records, seedlings multiply in February and bloom in summer and autumn with fine yellow flowers. The leaves are in the shape of an inverted heart and the plaques are like spirals. As for the word New Year's Eve, it means more beautiful. The homophony is overwhelming. The world is peaceful, to eliminate the evil and to bless peace. This is also one of the reasons why Qin Pingon bought 2 shops without saying a word. Of course, the more important thing is that it is related to the fact that he can own 2 properties for a small amount of money. Lu Xian said tentatively, "The next battle at Tuyue Mountain, why don't you let Xiang Dao explain the process in detail? You can just relax your mind for a while. You need to prepare early for the fall." He has been setting up a stall in Liju Cave for many years, and Lu Xian thinks he is good at eloquence. Qin Pingon nodded. Lu Xian got a bit of mind. He slid out from the Lotus Dojo, squatted beside Qin Pingan, smiled and waved with the 2 opposite people. He smiled and got up. The courtesy he should have is indispensable, and he salutes the 3rd master of Bai Yujing. The Confucian gentleman was even more like a big enemy, immediately got up and followed He Shou together. Lu Xian got up and made a return with the 2 of them. Qin Pingan said goodbye to the 2 of them, saying that he would go to the city head next door to find someone to talk about the past and return soon. Only one Lu Xian remained, and he became a storyteller. When He Shou heard that Qin Pingon had attacked the mountain more than 3,000 times with his sword, he finally cut ahead of the ascended peak great demon with his own sword. It was the chief culprit of the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain. The gentleman seemed to be numb. It was Master He's turn to be stunned and speechless for a long time. He raised his head and drank the wine in the pot. The old master wiped the corner of his mouth and turned his head to look outside the city. Qin Kingda's last soul, slaying the executor, one of the high gods with 1 sword. I have to admit that there is actually no great wall of sword chi in the world. But there are still sword repairs from the great wall of sword chi. After Qin Kingda's sword was released, Qin Pingon still asked the sword to support Yueshan, and the sword flew soaring. Moreover, according to the teaching of Lu Zhang, the culprit of the great demon was still a sword repairman. Lu Xian squatted there learning from a young hidden official with 2-handed sleeves. He smiled. If you add Li Zhen, then the disciples of Kaishan and Guanmen of Tueshan Dezu seem to have died under Qin Pingon's sword. In addition to the Battle of Tuyue Mountain, there were only 3 monsters in the fairyland. There are naturally more monks from the Jade Pu realm and the Earth Fairy demon race. However, one of the Immortal demon clan was replaced by a nascent Soul realm sword repair. Lu Xian intercepted fragments of the time-traveling picture. The sound, appearance of those monster monks were all made into hanging statues by the Master Lu. However, Lu Xian knew Qin Pingan's plan, so all the exploits other than the culprit of the great demon were allocated to Qi Tingji's Dragon Elephant Sword sect and Ning Yao's Feishing City. These brushstrokes can be described as shocking and terrifying war exploits, and Zhongtu Confucian Temple will carefully record the files. Qin Pingon first went to Ma Kushuan in Yu Shiwa's neighborhood. Yu Shiwu clasped his fists and smiled. "I have seen Lord Qin Shan. Except for the rest of the time there is nothing left." Ma Kuxuan's first disciple and maidservant did not dare to speak. As for the disciple of Ma Kushuan, he was confirming the identity of the Daoist in front of him. Qin Pingon held his fist in return for Yu Shiwu. Just as Ma Kuxuan said, Qin Pingon was jealous when he first met at Dadu Temple. A young man with a hatchet hanging on his waist suddenly took a step and asked, "Master Qin, can you still accept disciples in Luopa Mountain?" As a result, Ma Kuxuan kicked his on the ass, fell a dog to eat shit. The teenager didn't care, patted the ground with a palm, his body turned and fell to the ground. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "We will not accept disciples for the time being." The young man still didn't give up and asked, "Can you save me a place first?" Qin Pingon shook his head. Ma Kuxuan reached out and held the closed disciple's head and said with a smile, "A person rarely cares about his own shadow, but it doesn't matter if he is stepped on a foot anyway. The people on the mountain are alone, it's a trivial thing that doesn't hurt." Qin Pingon frowned slightly as if he couldn't guess what medicine was sold in Ma Kuxuan's gourd, so he didn't talk to him, just turned his head and asked Yu Shiwu, "Where are you going next?" Yu Shiwu smiled and said, "I plan to go to the high city built by Mo Jiajue first." Then Qin Pingon came to Wei Jin and Chao Jun. Wei Jin talked about his predecessor Zongyuan with his heartfelt voice. Qin Pingon looked solemn, nodded and said, "Fortunately, you got those sword intents, otherwise it will be very troublesome. Wei Jin asked, "I changed my mind halfway, didn't you go to the battlefield?" Qin Pingon said, "I have been detouring and finally walked to Tuya Mountain." Wei Jin pointed to the big moon in the sky and asked with a smile, "The result is such a big movement?" Qin Pingon laughed off. Chao Jun asked coldly, "Master Qin, you can tell me if I come to the Great Wall of Jianqi earlier, can I enter the Summer Palace?" Qin Pingon was a little surprised. He didn't know what Chao Jun asked about this. After thinking about it, he still treated people with sincerity and gave an answer, "I'm too boring to get in." It's not that Chao Jun's talents are not enough, but that the Summer Palace presided over the battle in those years and all lined up troops. The sole purpose is to pursue the smallest battle loss in exchange for the greatest battle exploits, to delay the war for longer and to delay the day as much as possible. To drag a day is a day. If it were changed to a battlefield that was evenly matched with Chao Jun's slanting character, most of it would make a difference, but compared to Lin Junbai and Scrofulariaceae, Chao Jun would definitely be inferior to them. After returning to his hometown, Qin Pingon specifically learned about Lu Sunmai's seed brother Lu Xuanmei, fellow villager Chao Jun's temperament, and the style of leading soldiers, because Wei Xian and Chao Jun had both eaten with Lu Xuanmei in the Dali army. Although they both held the title of a monk with the army, in fact they each led a battalion of cavalry in the end. Lu Xuanmei is no doubt about employing people. Regarding colleague Chao Jun, Wei Xian gave a saying that he is good at skirts and feet. Generally speaking, there are both praise and criticism. Sounds good, it means the use of soldiers is dangerous, and it is ugly, it means that it is a shameful attack for the sake of battle regardless of the cost. Of course Chao Jun himself will also take the lead. Chao Jun asked, "On the Tuiwa mountainside did you go with the Ascended Realm Great Demon?" Qin Pingon ignored Chao Jun's words, but took out 2 jugs of wine and handed them one to Wei Jin. Chao Jun stretched out his hand, "Lord Qin Shan, don't favor one and the other." Qin Pingon knocked out Chao Jun's palm with one elbow and asked Wei Jin, "Have you heard of the monster sword Xiuhui Ting of Hongye Jianzhou?" Wei Jin nodded and said, "Of course, but it seems that he didn't show up during the last war. It is said that he fell in the mountain gate to recuperate." Qin Pingon stretched out his thumb, wiped the corners of his mouth and said with a smile, "I slaughtered it easily this time." Wei and Jin did not say much, raised the jug and lightly touched Qin Pingon. "Only the sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi will know how the monster sword repairer is." Wei Jin asked with a smile, "This far tour you'll just accept it when you see it?" Qin Pingon smiled, "I still make do with it and it's a little bit rewarding." Wei and Jin joked, "I am the ancestor of Tuiwashan, so I must regret saying such a thing." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "It is necessary." Chao Jun is a little helpless since he can't even talk. "What Hongye Jianzhong, I have never heard of it. What is the allusion to, getting it right when you see it?" The great ancestor of the wild, and Qin Pingon talked about this for what? In the capital of the Clouded Dynasty, Qin Pingon obtained a set of sword formations as the center of the defense formation from the hand of the Emperor Yi Bao, who was named One Step. This set of sword formations, 12 pocket flying swords, were placed like a pen on the red coral pen holder. So, to be precise, they are 2 fairy soldiers. At that time Yi Bao was full of confidence and felt that he could smash Qin Pingyan. It was just 1,000 calculations. He could not count as the Qin Daoyu, who was wearing a lotus crown and a green gauze robe, but pretending to be a hermit. Qin Pingyan, and with a third-in-chief Bai Yujing next to him, was able to dismantle the formation, but the meat buns beat the dogs and there was no return. Earlier I heard Lu Chen said that the owner of Linlanglu, one of the 12th floors of Bai Yujing's 5 cities, most of the family's children have a Ji suffix in their names. If Qin Pingyan is willing to cut this coral pen holder, the price can be more than the real value. Double. Zigzag suffix. The Yao family, Yao Jinji, Yao Xianji, and Yao Lingji of the frontier army of the Daquan dynasty all carry the word Ji. As for the old lady in Xiandan City, the ascending ghost great demon of the Dao Qianggu, she is the ancestor of Xuanpu, the master of Wudi, and her real body is actually a mosquito. At that time she was forced to leave a tale of unknown origin. It was a well-deserved high-ranking immortal soldier. The 2 characters were inscribed with a worm and bird seal, Flick. Anyone who dared to name it this way should not be underestimated, such as the Tongye sect of Tonggis Hao, the Daiyue Qingshan in the wild world. A whisk, crimson long wooden handle, more than 3,600 white silk threads of unknown material, and a small gold ring to embellish the whisk. This thing was succeeded by Qiong'o for 2,000 years, but it has never been refined as a life thing, and on the path of darkness, it does not get the slightest bit of evil filth. In addition, 30% of the drag down the river water transport, and the pure moonlight from the bright moon and bright color. This trip is really rewarding. After drinking, Qin Pingyan got up and said, "You may need to withdraw from the city for a while." Wei Jin suddenly raised his head. Qin Pingyan said, "Unfortunately, the realm is borrowed." Wei Jin laughed angrily. "Why doesn't Master Lu lend me the realm? Even if I lend it to the Wei Jin, maybe he will be engraved by the wilds in turn." Qin Pingyan smiled at Chao Jun. "Look, we Dajiangxian Wei can enter the summer palace." The body shape disappeared in a flash and he returned to the city of Luchen and Heeshou. The battle record has ended and Heeshou has been waiting here for a long time. Qin Pingyan clasped his fist and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. He, let everyone withdraw from that half of the city." Heeshou smiled and agreed. Before leaving he hesitated. The old master turned out to hold a fist with Qin Pingyan. "Seems to be in this city. One is not a disciple of Confucianism for the time being, and the other is not a Confucian temple to accompany the saints. It is more like a river and lake encounter." After Heeshou and the gentleman left, Qin Pingyan stood on the side of the city, raised his head and glanced at the sky and the moon. Han Qiaosa returned to Hauran through the place where she returned to the ruins. She followed the decree of her brother. She really went to study in Baidi City, especially reading a few more books on war. The ancient demon who returned to the world after confirming that no one was being followed, swaggered and flew away, and then saw a tall woman in white clothes. Qin Pingyan made a point to the toe and swept down the city. Qin Pingyan stood on the ground facing the tall city head and said, "Excuse me, Master Lu, and show up for a while." Lu Chen was puzzled and joked, "Is it a matter of lettering that needs to be done by the poor? This is a bit embarrassing." Qin Pingyan was silent. Lu Shen did not continue to gag, and from the Lotus Dojo, a mustard heart came out and appeared beside Qin Pingyan in the form of a Taoist figure taught by Yujing's 3 palms. Lu Shen could not guess Qin Pingyan's mind. On this trip he followed the 5-sword repairman all the way to Toil, and finally Qin Pingyan succeeded in slashing the wild ancestral mountains. If the ancestors of Tueshan made the Great Wall of Jianqi an old almanac, then Qin Pingyan made Tueshan an old almanac as well. In addition, the move to drag the moon is about to be completed. To talk about splitting the accounts, it means sitting on the ground and splitting the spoils, and it is not his turn. However, all the damages can be ignored, adding a round of bright moon color to the Qingming world. The benefits of the road are immeasurable. Lu Chen has made up his mind that the poor road has completed his merits and returned to Bai Yujing. "Brother, you have to squeeze a smile for yourself, give yourself a thumbs up, you still have to have 2 hands, otherwise the matter is endless. Are you embarrassed to complain about the slack and laziness of the younger brother in the previous 100 years? Not only have they made up for the last 100 years, but even the merits of the next 100 years will be earned early." Furthermore, the sword box on Lu Ji's body was borrowed or not given by Ping Dao. Qin Pingyan took off the lotus crown and returned it to Lu Chen. The green gauze robe on his body also dissipated on its own, and then put away the two narrow knives folded on his waist. Only face the great wall of sword qi with the back of the sword in the blue shirt. Daofa Haoren Shitian. Sword energy lasts forever. Thunder Pond is heavy. Pidongchen. Fierce. Above the two sections of the city, there are 18 characters in total. There are Dao Fa Haoren and Shitian engraved on one side. Thunder Pond heavy ground. On the other side the sword energy will last forever. Pidongchen Meng. Old Master He Shou began to rush people. Everyone must evacuate the city head immediately. Wei Jin and Chao Jun have already left by themselves. Ma Kuxuan, Yu Shiwu and his party have also gone south, and the rest of the foreign monks who have come here to travel here have to leave one after another. Qin Pingon said, "This trip to the barren hinterland, the guardian who walked with the hidden official Qin Pingon to protect the way is awe-inspiring. On the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there are two types of guardians. One is the sword servant who is enshrined by the family and is from a rebel background, similar to the great sword Immortal Li Tumi of the Yan family and Nalan Yeshing of Ningfu. The sword servant said that there is no waiter. The derogatory meaning. The other is a high-level sword repair, responsible for guarding the low-level sword repair, so that the latter will not die prematurely in the war, hence the name Sword Master. Therefore the guardian of the guard not only walks along the road but also guards the younger generation. The teacher of the teacher, every time he passes the sword, it saves people and preaches." Lu Qin broke through Tianhuang with a solemn expression. "Amazing Lu Xin, fortunate to be with you. Ping's grass floats without roots, floating in the water without indulging in it. 10,000 years of criminals and sword repairs, like duckweed floating in the sky, dead without graves. Only sword energy will last. And the natal flying sword of Qin Qingdu, the eldest sword fairy, is named Duckweed. The great wall of Jianqi that has stood for thousands of years, and the last hermit of the last generation of Jianqi." Looking at each other silently. Qingshan sword repair holding a long sword night tour, with fierce sword aura far away in the highest part of the city to engrave. The person who engraved the word Ping is Qin Pingon, the swordsman. Sword of Coming Chapter 874. There is still a 4D chapter before 1 o'clock in the morning. Lu Qin rolled his sleeves and waved his hand to create a ban on heaven and earth, helping Qin Pingon to hide the bleak weather of the fall, and reminded with his heart, "Since you have planned for a long time things far away in the sky anyway you can't control it. Then leave it alone, it's better to clean up the immediate matter first and return to the city immediately." Half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi where He Dao is located, can help Qin Pinyin to stabilize Dao's heart and realm. The mountains and rivers within the small world of the human body, a heart of Tao like a flat boat, drifting in the stormy waves, then the half of the Great Wall of Jianqi where Hedao is located is the best ballast in the world. Qin Pingon nodded and said hoarsely, "Wait a moment." Lu Xin asked, "Why don't you fall to the front of the city? At least you don't have to suffer so much." Qin Pingon gave an answer that made Lu Qin speechless. "The monk fell into the realm and the mountains and rivers are broken, but they can benefit the martial arts. According to the method taught by Uncle Li, I can find out more of the mountain and river context formed by flesh and blood. It can also be regarded as a means to improve the physique of the martial artist." Lu Xin instantly understood. Wufu is full of vigor and knowledge. Take a trip to the barren world. For Qin Pinyin, who was in a terrible fall, of course he couldn't afford to suffer for nothing. At the moment, there was a drag oil bottle beside the two of them. It remained silent all the time, carefully looking at the two human monks. A young human sword repairer and a self-proclaimed helper by the former. One decline, one rise. This makes it very surprised. The 14th realm cultivation base can also borrow people? This is more shocking than seeing a 14-level monk. The world after 10,000 years is really surprising. Through the picture scroll of time given to it by that existence and several books similar to Shanhazi, it learned that the person in front of it was a Taoist priest. In the ancient times, the world's Qimen, regardless of the human race or the monster race, were collectively referred to as Taoists. I never imagined that there is now a monk's way, as if the word Dao has been monopolized by the Taoist priests. The lotus crown worn on the head of the young Taoist priest is one of the status symbols of the Baiyujing Taoist priests. Lu Qin was also observing the ancient great monster who was repairing the ascending realm sword. It's only a few steps away and am worried that the other party will give myself a sword without asking indiscriminately. At this moment the big demon turned into a young face, looking at the age of a weak crown, yellow hat and blue shoes and a linen shirt. But it doesn't seem to be a bit hostile, on the contrary it looks like a horrendous scholar who travels to study, or from a relatively poor family background. The problem is what it looks like is a fart. It is indeed an ancient monster whose combat power can be completely comparable to the barbaric old throne. Zhou Xian asked in his heart. It followed up to the top of the city? This guy's natal magic seems to be able to control the heartstrings, we all have to relax a little. Qin Pingan nodded and said, let it follow. Qin Pingan certainly can't believe it, but she can't believe it. On the road of spiritual practice I am used to complicating simple problems all the time, thinking and thinking more and more. It seems to be thankless, but in fact, in order to one day face all the messy and complicated situations and be able to solve complex problems. Simplified, this is another kind of flower and fruit at the same time. Zhou Xian stretched out his hand to put Qin Pingan's arm, shrank the mountains and rivers and came to the city together. When he arrived at the head of the city, Qin Pingan sat on the ground and sat cross-legged on the head of the city. He put his hands on his knees and exhaled a heavy breath. Although his body and spirit were bleak, the martial artist was so strong that he still made the monster look at him with admiration and physical toughness. I'm not losing to the monster race. Seeing the young race's palm facing up, breathing and breathing gently, it is a life thing that moves the 5 elements, its face is 7 orifices, the mist is like white snakes and between the sleeves, it is like a green dragon lingering around. It nodded in approval and said, good weather. Somehow when I came here I had already learned the Diya dialect of Zhongtu Shenzhou and the Dali Mandarin dialect of Aquarius. Zhou Xian reminded, it is best to take out all the external objects that have not been practiced. Qin Pingan took a deep breath and took off the night tour behind him, a sword-raising gourd that had been a hip flask for many years. Take out the Xing Zhan Can 2 narrow knives with different kings and ministers. A whisk, a set of sword formations and a coral pen holder. 3 treasures of the rank of immortal soldiers. The eyelids trembled when he saw the ascending realm monster race sword repair. Is not an ancient soldier or a fairy soldier cast by later generations. Zhou Xian was just like a babbling housekeeper and continued to ask, how to deal with this inexplicable guy in front of me? Qin Pingan can rest assured to be a hand-handling shopkeeper. Zhou Xian can't rest assured that there is an ascendant peak swordsman next to him. If he is the only one present, even face-to-face quarrels will be indifferent, but if he wants to protect Qin Pingan, Zhou Xian is really worried. Qin Pingan obviously did not intend to just pick up his sons like this. He was not in a hurry to become immersed and turned around and asked, did you give yourself an alias? The big demon immediately knelt down and whispered, never. Qin Pingan thought for a while and suggested, it's better to say like a candle, like a candle, like a candle, like a candle. How do you feel about it? The big demon nodded and said, good name. It seemed to feel that it was not sincere enough and added a saying, fortunately. Qin Pingan smiled and said, but in my hometown, whether monks or ordinary people want to take root, you can give yourself a pseudonym as soon as the household registration file says. The real body of this great demon is a spider. And spiders are also called Proki and Shizi. So in the small town of Qin Pingan's hometown, there is an old saying that has been passed down orally from generation to generation, spiders gather Pepsi. The old people use spiders to make webs as a sign of joy. They saw spider webs at home. No matter whether there are spiders in the webs or not, the owner of the house does not usually clean them. Only during the New Year's Day the old man gently rolls it up with a broomstick. And then let the children at home take the broom and send it out. The child holding the broom on the way also needs to say a few words like, thank you for the old, please add the new happy, which means saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new. When Qin Pingan left his hometown for a long trip, he discovered that Howren had the custom of Qixi festival. The women wore new clothes and placed melon and fruit cakes in the courtyard. They looked like spider webs as well as handmade colorful embroidered paper cuts. After burning incense and candles, the woman held the colored thread in her hand facing the lamp shadow and threaded the thread through the pinhole, in order to be clever with the gods. If the real body of the great sword Immortal Zhang Lu Tianlu is a kind of auspicious beast, then the spider is a kind of happy insect that can predict auspiciousness. Qin Pingan also found patterns on some temple murals and some literati calligraphy and paintings with spider silk hanging down and spiders hovering, and it was called Happy Falling from the Sky. You must know that Qin Pingon is a man who is on the threshold of King Fifeng's shop and refuses to move without waiting for the phrase, Gong Shi Fa Kai. It smiled and said, "Let me think about it." Flicking through the books in Xinhu, planning to find a more elegant pseudonym for herself. Lu Qin rubbed his eyes. This fellow Taoist even had a somewhat shy look. I met for the first time in that round of Haotsai Mingyue, but it was not such a gentle temper. It glanced at the vast territory south of the city head, and remembered the previous conversation. If the master expels you, you will return a swordsmanship to me. The host. The light and fluttering sentence of one of the highest ones. It was like Bai Zhe held his head and smashed hundreds of big pits on the ground in the early years, and then dragged it to the bright moon and threw it fiercely, smashing into an old nest. Its swordsmanship in the early years, it was the sword holder who had been asking for it. As for 10,000 years later, Bai Zhe let it wake up and then wake up. Of course, after climbing to practice, Bai Zhe has been severely taught. When it heard that name, it immediately came to a sudden. I dare not say one more word. Even because it was worried about troubles, it took the initiative to use an ancient closing the mountain secret technique to block all reveries related to the word master. Only left a very heavy thought for himself, reminding himself not to disobey this person, a human monk named Qin Pingon. So Lu Qin said that it is good at manipulating heartstrings, and what he said is true. Qin Pingon said, "We have 3 chapters of the law and we have returned to the world with me. Daoists must abide by it." It sternly said, "Master, please speak." In the gap between finding a name for herself, she also learned a lot of how to call her. "First, after returning to my hometown with me, you are not allowed to shoot at a trainer who is below the Yupu realm, no matter what the reason is." It nodded. The Qi trainer under the upper 5 realms, all magic powers, all attacking magic weapons, even the flying swords of sword repair, just treat it as tickling it and worry about it. Secondly, in the ascendant realm, the 2 monks of Yupu and Immortal encounter conflicts. You can detain them and ban them, but you can't kill them without authorization based on your preferences. It still has no objections. The avenue is dangerous, so be careful. When I woke up this time, I first encountered a large number of sword repairers. There was a bright moon in the sky. Oh, it was 2 bright moons. If he said nothing, it was gone. Then I looked down and added that there was a missing moon in the world. Oh. Today's awe-inspiring world is too scary. The sun reminded him that he seemed to be restrained, but in fact he was kind and he had to know what was good or bad. Finally, when you get to my hometown, you will treat it as if you were going to the village. Do as the customs, talk less, watch more, practice carefully, and be a good person. In addition to these 3 things, my downfall mountain has few rules and no landscape taboos. In addition to the realm, you still need to cover up so that you don't need to deliberately conceal your identity as a monster. It nodded. I have written all the reminders from the sun. Qin Pingon glanced at Lu Qin. In fact, Qin Pingon is also very strange. It seems that the amiable young monk in front of him is too far apart from the ascendant swordsman who first met on the side of the bright moon and on the spider silk. Speaking like a schoolboy who is listening to the teacher's lectures. Lu Qin said in his heart, "It may be a kind of secret swordsmanship to cut the character, suppressing all the fierce nature, this kind of thing. You are not unfamiliar." Qin Pingon said, "In the future in the Haoran world, I will help you to be rational when you encounter an unreasonable monk. You have to adapt quickly to this kind of going to the village and doing the same." It smiled and said nothing. After all, is an ascending realm sword repairman. In the wild world where the strong respects the strong, he still has to rely on the realm to speak. Qin Pingon didn't take it seriously and smiled. "After talking about the truth, you will come out again." He just hummed, "It's pretty much the same." It saw that Qin Pingon was going to heal his injuries and said, "Young master, I have given myself a pseudonym, Unfamiliar. Is it appropriate? If the young master thinks it is feasible, he will call me a little stranger later." Lu Qin smiled awkwardly. Eavesdropping is really not authentic. At the same time, Lu Qin secretly raised the level of swordsmanship of this senior Shizhu. Qin Pingon is not much better. He takes 1 bite at a time and finally cultivates a kind of supernatural powers that can be heard by the old cook. But then he has another one? Qin Pingon smiled and said, "What's wrong with this? But you can just call my name later." It nodded and said, "Okay, son. Xiaomo, this is a meeting ceremony." Qin Pingon spread out his palms, like a pocket-sized moon, rising slowly among the mountains and rivers in the palm of his palm, Hanging high in the sky, the moonlight shattered by the long sword was broken and round. Lu Xian smiled. This is my gift to the sun in return. It twisted the bright moon with 2 fingers, gently put it in its sleeve and then turned its palm. There was an ancient relic, Qianglu Yiyu, full of moonlight and snowy white. Under closer inspection, more than 100 buildings, ancient styles, row upon row. Lu Xian's eyes hinted that Qin Pingon, don't be so polite. This is a veritable former site of the Moon Palace, such as the Dragon Palace of the ancient Dragon King of the 4 Seas. Qin Pingon thanked him and put it in his sleeve without hesitation. After Lu Xianyang and Xie Yu's wedding, there was money for them. Lu Xian sighed and roughly guessed Qin Pingan's thinking. The boy with good fortune really is a boy with good fortune. Qin Pingon began to stabilize his realm. Just like in the world, he had to quell his rebellion and clean up the old mountains and rivers. Returning from the end of Wu Fu to the real level fell to a level of vigor. From the monk's Yupu realm he fell all the way to the Jindan realm. Lu Qin and Daoist Shizhu sat farther away chatting together. I took out 2 pots of special peach pulp Immortal brew from Baiyu Jingshan Xiaocheng, and took out a piece of talisman paper as big as a sketch of a bucket as a tablecloth, put a few dishes with wine, hand-picked cucumbers, cold pig ears, and finally a plate. Pine nuts and almonds are full of dang dang. Looking at the slightly restrained Daoist Shizhu, Lu Qin became more and more surprised, controlling his mood and changing his mind. This is obviously a method of ancient gods. These old predecessors have used many lost methods, which is really eye-opening. Lu Xian asked with a smile. Senior Shizhu returned to the world this time, how do you feel about it? Xiao Mo looked melancholy and said, there are 2 things that are 2 different things, but friends are scattered, the heart is like a knife and the grief is broken and the feelings are uncontrollable. Pause for a moment. Xiao Mo raised the wine glass and made a more concise summary of his mood, just 1 word, bitter. Lu Qian followed by raising the wine glass and tapping it lightly. I heard this, the trail is about to stop, senior. Xiao Mo said, but it's okay to say. Lu Xian smiled and said, life is hard to come by. Besides, there are people who share hardships and suffering will not be so bitter. Xiao Mo was deeply impressed and smiled. Friend Lu, Daoist sees you well. Lu Xian asked, the predecessors seem to be in the later generations. The reputation is not obvious? The implication is that you have such a high level of predecessor, why you have not left a series of feats in the wild world, which will be passed down in the world for thousands of years. Xiao Mo nodded and said, I like to concentrate on swordsmanship. I don't like to fight with anyone. I'm really good at doing things with power and prestige. Lu Xian sighed, the hero is nameless, it's wrong in the world. You must go with your predecessor. After Xiao Mo and Lu Qian each drank a glass of wine, they thought for a while. I once hunted down Yang Ji, but unfortunately I was not good at swordsmanship. It took more than a month to kill Yang Ji, but Jun Yan stopped and saved him. I was one enemy too and I ran away if I couldn't fight. Lu Qian shook his hand and almost spilled the drink on the ground. He quickly cast a spell to pour the drink back into the glass, then drank it with his head up, wiped the corners of his mouth and quickly apologized. I heard that the feat is like a thunderbolt in the sky. Got a gaff. Although Xiao Mo had doubts in his heart, a 14th level monk, why did he make a fuss about this kind of thing? But the other party was like that. Joining, Xiao Mo also smiled a little more on his face. There is no way this ancient great demon that has been sleeping for a long time has more memories, or those tragic battles in which all the gods fell like heavy rain 10,000 years ago, and the corpses of the great demon piled up into mountains after the death of the great demon. Nowadays, the majestic mountains that are regarded as the ancestral mountains and main peaks in the barbaric world are almost all turned into remnants of the corpse of the great demon's true body. Naturally, it never feels that any catch-and fight is worthy of the word peak. Lu Xian and Xiao Mo talked about the old co-owner of Diluo and the ancestors who moved to the mountain. Zhu Wei is still happy now, but on the contrary he was detained by the Confucian temple at the site of the alchemy furnace abandoned by Daozu. Xiao Mo listened seriously, apparently an excellent listener. After Lu Qian finished nagging, he took a sip of wine. It turns out that Zhu Wei and Yang Ji have never formed a Taoist couple. Looking around, Xiao Mo then sighed with emotion. The Tao is uncertain and the 3 realms are insecure. It is like being in a firehouse, full of suffering, endless karma and terrible fear. Lu Xian nodded and said, the firehouse in the 3 realms, the clouds and the water are cool, and it is becoming more and more valuable for people to travel freely. Lu Chen picked up a chopsticks dish, chewed slowly and asked curiously, "Senior is still studying Buddhism?" Xiaoma smiled. "I was fortunate enough to listen to a monk's statement under the Bodhi tree. It is beyond the barriers of words and can accommodate guests from all directions. It is truly incomparable." Lu Chen couldn't talk anymore. He has never dared to deal with the Buddha. Xiaomo asked, "The son in his hometown seems to have a major legacy?" Lu Chen nodded and shook his head. "Yes, no more. When Hai is careful, young hidden official, two completely different kinds of people. Careful, pursue the maximization of profit. Qin Pingon is always pursuing errorlessness and preventing the worst result from appearing. As Qin Ping's successor Beidasheng Jingzhuzhong in fact, did not rank high on the top of Zhongtu Shenzhou earlier. Otherwise, Pei Cup brought his disciple Chao Ci back from the Great Wall of Jianqi, and returned to Middle Earth from the Fallen Mountain, and asked about Baidi City. But for the hidden Jingzhuzhong, Lu Chen always felt that he couldn't be too high on him. Only 1,000 days is a thief, there is no reason for 1,000 days to prevent thieves. When Zhou felt that Qin Pingon was most complacent, and the Saint of Rites never sat in the awe-inspiring world, the opportunity was indeed rare and fleeting. Then Zheng Juzhong, who has already entered the 14th realm, is indeed the most suitable person to play against Zhou Mi's irrational hand. The question is, did Qin Pingan intercede with Zheng Juzhong? Or did you do something quietly? In either case, Lu Chen felt that Qin Pingon would pay a high price. Xiao Mo said, "When I follow the sun back to my hometown, I think there is always a chance to do my best." Lu Chen smiled and said, "You can have it, not too much." Xiao Mo nodded and said yes, then looked into the distance, smiled and said, "I learn the sword faster and make the sword faster." Only mentioning swordsmanship, did it reveal the aura that a peak demon should have? After Lu Chen and Xiao Mo talked about the customs of the world. In fact, there is no shortage of strange people and strangers in the world. Qingming Tianxia, the territory is roughly divided into 19 states, while Haoran is Jiuzhou. Can be seen that the mountain and water transportation of the two worlds are very different. Even in a world full of Taoist officials, there are still some temples. Those Buddhist monasteries and dragon elephants. The Dharma is difficult and incredible beyond imagination. Lu Chen traveled the world and visited the big temple. There was an old monk in a small temple who was an unknown person. He was close to the heart of the sky. The room where the old abbot was located was a place that could accommodate thousands of teachers and sons. Seat. Xian Du Guan Sun Dao Chang Wu Shuangjiang. Needless to say, the year-old Chu Gong Shou Sui, the guy with the nickname Xiao Bai, seems to be overestimated but in fact has been underestimated. A free repair sword fairy named Nye Bixia in Yenzhou, who has been in the cloud and water for 3,000 years, his whereabouts are uncertain, playing the world. The great monk Yuan Huanxian, the Taoist name is Nanyang Yu, the nickname is a CI poet, and an iron flute is attached to his waist. He claims to be "Heaven knows me sincerely," but he is the existence of "Heaven raises the word man with 100 evils." A Shanin feather guest named Tai likes to raise geese. Lu Chen mentioned more than a dozen names in one breath, and the life and deeds of any Taoist official can be written as a strange and strange. As for the way of martial arts, Lin Jiangxian, the world's first martial artist. And the hard work of Runyue Peak. This name is hard work. As a result, martial arts practice is not hard at all. Even if you switch to practice, it is not hard. Knowing that naming works so well, Lu Chen changed his name to Lu Yudi, and Taoist name, Ant. The Bai Yujing in the Qingming world is similar to the Middle-earth God continent in the awe-inspiring world, not the Middle-earth Confucian temple. Is in charge of the entire world and its jurisdiction is like a private boundary of a sect. On the other hand, the territory that really belongs to the Confucian temple is actually only the 3 University Palace and the 72 Academy. These things are all talks between Lu Chen and Xiaomo Dao, friends at the wine table at first sight. I just accidentally listened to the young hidden official. How could it be considered that Bai Yu Jinglu Zhangjiao collided with the enemy and rebelled and killed the individual unjustly? Whoever dares to wrong the poor Dao is about to move out of Brother Yu. Although Qin Pingon is like an old monk entering Ding, in fact the conversation between Lu Chen and Xiao Mo can be heard. Before Ning Yao from the colorful world, the sword soaring, if it was not a temporary intention. Otherwise she could bring Qin Ping in a piece of spy information about the Qingming world, which is the result of the collection of the sword repair of Fei Xingcheng roughly recorded. Major events that have occurred in the Qingming world in the last 1,000 years. The intelligence taught by Zhang Lu can of course be able to find out and fill in the gaps, and compared to those rumors they will be closer to the truth. Lu Daoyu's second hometown high-ranking people come out in large numbers. Presumably Bai Yujing, who is a big leader in the world, will only be even more unattainable. Xiao Emo sighed with emotion. I will not go to travel in the future. Lu Xian smiled and said nothing. This was too early. Xiao Emo asked, what is the place of the sun's hometown? After all, I will settle down there in the future. Lu Xian was full of triumph. He held a cup in one hand, shook it lightly, held chopsticks in one hand and flew under the chopsticks. He said vaguely, the Taoist friend is asking the right person. Xiao Dao has set up a fortune-telling booth for many years. Well, there is a reputation. Old, young, women and children, when they saw the trail, their eyes and complexions were full of enthusiasm from the heart. Let's make an analogy. Your son, how was he seen in the Great Wall of Jianqi? That old Lizhu cave sky is just how popular it is. Xiao Emo leaned forward, holding his sleeves empty with one hand, and twisting an almond from the dish with the other. Listening to Lu Daoyu's words, he put the dry-fried almond in his mouth and chewed and swallowed it before he nodded clearly. Friend Lu Dao is very popular. I don't think it is strange. Lu Chen raised his hand holding the chopsticks, blocked his mouth and lowered his voice. It's just that brother Xiao Emo needs to pay attention to something. When you get there, listen to your son's advice and you really have to be careful. As for the reason, let Xiao Dao be, fellow Daoist said slowly. Xiao Emo listened to Lu Daoyu's introduction and was full of vigilance at the Lizhu cave sky, frowned slightly and was very sad. As expected, he was a veritable dead man. But the most dangerous thing has actually passed. Because there is no need to return swordsmanship for the time being. Once Qin Pingon, the young hidden official, engraved the characters Ping or the words Qing and Du on the side of the city. Then it will be brought back to the city's head by the supreme being who taught him swordsmanship, then stands still and be cut off by Qin Pingon. Anyway, it will have to let the latter cut out an engraved combat merit. Add the previously existing Qin character. May come together with two names or Qin Pingon. Either Qin Qingdu. Qin Qingdu Xiao Emo is of course very familiar. Was a sword repairer who was not the best in his early years, but had the most stable ascent. After reaching the summit, Qin Qingdu was the most difficult to deal with, the sword was the most ruthless and there were many strange things. Lu Chen raised his wine glass. I can rest assured if there is a small street friend as the protector. Xiao Emo shook his head and said, I'm not a protector, I'm just a dead man. It does not have so many curved intestines. Just like meeting the Supreme Being before, the two sides reunited after a long time. Even after 10,000 years, it is still grateful and awe is still there. Will never fight back. This has nothing to do with the swordsmanship and realm of both sides. Otherwise, even if you are against Baizhe, if there is a dispute, there is really a great dispute involving life and death. Even if it can't be beaten, is it possible that you can't even fight to the death? When will sword repair only hand swords to the lower realm? There is no such reason. In addition to fighting with Baizhe from the world to the bright moon, Hao Kai, the great ancestor who later occupied Tuyue Mountain and opened up the Hall of Heroes, rises. There is even the first monk in heaven and earth. There are two sword repairmen who are in the same generation as Qin Qingdu. One is Yuanxiang and the other is Longjun. Which one hasn't played before? Of course they all lost. Brother Xiaomal, what do you think is the most important thing to be a human being? Living for a long time. For example, 10,000 years ago, it formed a net to catch all the flying birds in the sky. The genus of Luan, phoenix and crane are all food for the belly. There is another one who flutters his wings and travels between the world and the earth, who likes to drive away from the sea. Jiaolong, after gathering, swallow again. Friends, Lu does not seem to agree. You have to speak of conscience. People treat people as scholars and I serve as scholars. Xiao Emo quickly checked the Xinhu books to find the meaning of the word guosher. Before you return to your hometown, can you go to see Xianxia? Qin Pingon suddenly asked. Of course it's not to let you recognize his identity as the first apprentice. This is your own family affair and I don't mix it up. Xianxia, also known as Gu Qingsong, is a strange man who doesn't move in the name of realm. He once helped Lu Xian to punt the sea to visit the Immortals, so Chao Rong and He Xiaoyang have been regarded as unregistered disciples of the master Lu Xian. Gu Qingsong was at the Confucian temple. He had promised himself that in the future he would take care of all the disciples of Luopishan he met on the path of spiritual practice. Lu Xianxia smiled and said, "You just don't take the fall seriously?" Qin Pingan said, "Habits are good, practice makes perfect. That's why you don't know when I am here how many times the golden core has been broken and how many times have fallen." Xiao Imo sighed sincerely, "The young master is a true sword and immortal." Lu Xian said, "No problem, I promised you, just meet that fool." Qin Pingan even had spare energy and threw something to Lu Xian. After Lu Xian took over, it was the coral pen holder and said in surprise, "Gave me away?" The young hidden official squinted at Lu Zhangjiao. Lu Xian said angrily, "I can try to get half of the Dragon Palace revenue from Wang Dongji, but how do we divide the accounts?" Qin Pingan said, "Teacher Lu takes care of it according to his conscience." Xiao Imo smiled and nodded. It seemed that the son really regarded himself as his own person. He had spoken so politely before, but when he came to Lu Daoyu it seemed to be different. Qin Pingan said, "You and I are divided into 3 to 7. The premise is on the Yunxiu mountain of Aquarius Island. You have to help me figure out a countermeasure. If it is feasible, we will divide the account between 4 and 6. When Yangxishan Kai Jinjian helped Fei Jian spread the letter, Qin Pingan must pay back the incense. What's more, the Gingyun Feng Dixie and I just met Huang Zhongho, the owner of the peak, is also quite interesting. He can be regarded as a half-drinker. In the past 100 years, Yunxiu Mountain could not stop the trend of gas flow, and the skin was empty, so even if Yunxiu Mountain was included in the sect, within 300 years the Yunxiu 19 peaks, including the green juniper and Gingyun, and those beautiful mountains and rivers that have not yet been opened by the Immortals, will become a cloud of smoke, and become a place with thin spiritual energy that is not suitable for cultivation. And the decline of Yunxiu Mountain's luck is quite strange. In the view of Qin Pingan, who was cultivated in the 14 realms at that time, it was not even the 2 characters of mountain and water that could be solved. Wonderful, there is a treasure in the poor road, and it is quite fate with that Yunxiu Mountain. Qingxia Yi is not dead, it is a coincidence, and the right medicine is prescribed. Lu Xian laughed, and from his sleeve he drew out a jade, more embossed. This object has a big strangeness. The color can change with the seasons, showing different auspicious patterns and ancient seal characters, corresponding to the 4 seasons. Qin Pingan nodded. "Then I'll help Master Lu to meet Senior Gu on the sea, and then go ashore and take a trip to Yunxiu Mountain in person." Lu Xian wondered, "Don't you send this thing by yourself?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Learn, do you? Otherwise, I have to go to Zhenjianfeng to find Huang Zhongho for a drink in the future and I will lose my taste." Lu Xian asked, "Do you? Who is sacred?" Qin Pingan did not respond and became immersed again. Lu Xian had to continue drinking with Xiao Imo and stopped talking. Xiao Imo looked at the young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown. Being alive, it is inevitable to feel lonely. Who knows to ask for the truth but not for the fish? At this time he recognizes his freedom. Jing Juzhong deserves to be Jing Juzhong. Lu Chen suddenly showed joy. This is completely blocked and there is no omission, and some hidden dangers have been solved easily. Qin Pingan opened his eyes and spread out his hands. "Come on with a pot of wine." Lu Chen threw a pot of peach syrup from Shenshao City. Qin Pingan opened the mud seal, took a big sip and whispered softly, "Damn, I will kill this one day." Xiao Imo still said from the bottom of his heart, "The young man is a true sword and immortal." Lu Xian wiped his face. This little fellow Daoist in the Luopa mountain, he can surely get mixed up. The downfall of the mountain world is another very ordinary day, sunny and sunny. Today Zhu Lian was on the side of Huimeng Mountain in Daxing construction, and took Jiang to go to the end in person. The old cook was fighting, and the young monk was helping the craftsman on the mountain to flick the line. The little Muanshu is still busy on the side of Luopa Mountain. In the morning I first went to the master's house on the first floor of the bamboo building to clean it. The books on the table were accidentally skewed a little bit. The accountant's Mr. Wei Wenlong was reconciling with Zhang Jiazhen, who was half of his disciple. Zhang Li Changming sat aside and drank tea in silence. Miu was sitting on the stone bench beside the cliff, sipping melon seeds, and staring with a small Zhou Qinghuang incense man who came to the mountain to burn incense. Without Qin Lingjun being there to thread the needles, but the young actually didn't know what to talk about. If the Tsingyi boy is here, it will be lively and there will always be some words that make me confused. For example, when it comes to getting people's hands soft, Qin Lingjun will look at each other with Xianxia Shaoran, and then a loud voice laughing, a belly laugh, rolling around with his belly on the table. Even Miyu turned his head a few times before knowing what the two embryos were talking about. Miyu was wondering, really all the skills learned from the janitor Jing Dafeng? This made me Xianxian more fascinated by the brother Gale. The old cook Wei Shanjun plus Qin Lingjun, one by one they all like to push the credit to Jing Dafeng anyway, so in me Xianxian's heart, there is an extremely stalwart image capable of literary and military skills. Looks dignified. The game of chess is very good. Even Zhu Lian and Wei Bo couldn't win. They can also talk about the knowledge of imperial examination system with Chao Qingqing and Yuan Lai, two young reading seeds. It is said that every day guarding the gate here he will patiently give instructions to Tsun Yuanji. Speech is humorous, capable of energizing, vulgar and elegant. White-haired hairpins are always showing up, and when men are pouting there is nothing wrong with women, so they have to stand aside. At the gate of the mountain, the right guardian of Luapa Mountain is dozing off on a bamboo chair, holding a golden pole and a green bamboo stick and a chicken pecking at rice. The little girl in black rubbed her eyes and began to expect the good guy mountain master to take herself to the Red Candle Town to play together, walking around the rivers and lakes regardless of distance. There are good days during the day and good evenings at night. Fireflies are flying, crickets and frogs are arguing, and the flowing water between the fields is stopping by. The weeds dozed off in the breeze and the stars in the sky blinked at the world. The millet grains jumped up one by one, holding a golden pole in one hand and a hiking stick in one hand, playing a set of crazy sword skills learned from the money. Qin Lingjun was at the pavilion on the mountain road, pulling his good brother Bai Xian to watch a beautiful scene. Bai Xian made a pot of wolfberry tea for himself before going out. Qin Lingjun said that drinking this kind of tea would make him look like an old-fashioned quack. Bai Xian is very annoyed now. It's not like practicing sword, it's really hard to learn boxing. Just look at it and use it. Fortunately, as long as you don't enter the ring, you will still be invincible. Qin Lingjun often used which pot to open and not to mention which pot. He said that the last time you competed with Pei Qian, it was very powerful and everyone was going to fall down. He was so shocked to stand back. If it were not his own brother, Bai Xian would have rolled up his sleeves and had a fight. A penny stumped the heroes. Qin Lingjun was on the side of Luapa Mountain a few years ago. He was shy in his pocket and had no money to hold his own. He really couldn't keep the money. In those years when Luapashen was the hardest, Qin Lingjun was desperate to save face. In fact, he paid out of his own pocket and changed the way to send money to his mountain. Except for the untouchable daughter-in-law, there is indeed no spare money on hand. Later, Shaman's salary, most of the money was on the Luzhou trip to Beiju and made a few friends. He was used to spending a lot of money and it was gone early. So every time he looked in the mirror, Qin Ling would spend a lot of money to talk and he had to brew for a long time about what to say, so it was not a waste of money. Fortunately, I met the Chief Shou, who is rich and powerful, but is 100 times better than Wei Shanjun. Because Chief Shou left 2 bags of fairy money, a bag of rain money and a bag of small summer money, all to Qin Lingjun, saying that he was asked to help him, and don't let Fairy Yidefeng Liu's mirror flower water moon be too deserted. Before there was a drink in Qilong Lane. Qin Lingjun, Chief Shou and the host Jiao Lao Xianxian all had a good time. Qin Lingjun drank a blushing face, stood on the bench, patted his chest vigorously and assured Jiang Shangzhen, "Which one of our brothers in whom don't talk much, we are all in the wine, see you later." Yidefeng, the female cultivator Lu Runyan, was secretly opened by the fairy in Nantang Lake. There were not many visitors, but the aura of Yidefeng was not small. Jing Hua Shueyue, who was just supported by 2 people, one called Beng Li Jinjuan and the other called Long Li Xiabexiu. The shot was outrageous. In Qilong Alley, the white-haired boy at the New Year's shop was so angry that the little dumb boy was so angry that he pulled the girl peanuts from the shop next door, soaked in the sun at the door and ate the pastries on credit. I was thinking about cheating some money from Chui Peanut to pay off the debt. Old Shinxian Jia came from his Chaotu shop to the next door at the counter chatting with old brother Shi. Although Shi Ro annoys this neighbor who likes to show off, she has to admit that this old Jia is really not a mix of food and drink. For example, every February 2nd, the blind old Taoist will let his disciple Tianjir be the money dragon, pick up a kettle, put in a few coins, go to the well to draw water, and on the way back, sprinkle the pot of water all the way and finally pour the remaining pot of water and the coins into the water tank in the backyard of the shop. In addition, every time to Qingming, burning paper money at the corner of the street in fact pays more attention. In Luopa Mountain, the most caring about these old customs, except for the steward Zhou Xian, is this old fairy Jia who has traveled north and south for more than half his life. Neighbors' celebrations will also help. Just eat a meal and don't charge money. Not only small towns. In fact, several prefectures and counties in Longzhou will also invite the more and more famous old Jia, a wealthy portal of course. You have to give a red envelope depending on the size of your heart and do what you can. It doesn't matter if you give too much, if you give less. If the family is not well off, the veteran will not take a penny, eat a meal and give a pot of local rice wine, which is enough. People in Luopa Mountain may really like to drink or eat as a meal only Jia Sheng. In fact, neither Miyu nor Qinling are so old-fashioned to drink. Today the old Daoist leaned against the counter and chatted with Shi Rou about his mountain lord. The fairy Jia stroked his beard and smiled. Our mountain lord's words and deeds are cautious. Don't underestimate it, this is a kind of precept. In the entire Dali Longzhou boundary except for a few monks, there is no idea what happened up and down the mountain. In fact, almost the entire Aquarius gas trainer is so ignorant. Because of that vision it was too fast. The sky opens with holes, a white light flashes away. In the fallen mountain only Cui Dongshan, lying in the corridor on the second floor of the bamboo building, noticed something wrong. The Wawawatian demon over Qilong Lane felt a terrifying power that was almost suffocating. Is like a huge calamity in which the ascending realm great monk breaks through the realm. Mountain monarch Weibo felt in his heart. In an instant, Weibo even mistakenly thought that the entire Beiyue boundary would be destroyed. He just waited until Weibo left the mansion and came to the top of Piyun Mountain, and found that there was nothing unusual. Illusion is certainly not an illusion. That was Zhou Mi's handwriting personally to the world. Is Zhou Mi's first real sharp shot after reaching the sky. It was just an extinction disaster that was originally enough to make the entire old Lizhu cave disappear. Only because one person blocked it, it disappeared in an instant. A strange man who seems to be a visitor, slender, wearing a snow-white robe, standing at the table at the gate of Luopa Mountain, with a gentle smile, turning his head and asking a little black girl softly, "Can you sit?"